All right, folks, it's another online dinner party. Of course, we'll be having all kinds of conversation around education and a number of other things during the course of this afternoon, and I'm looking forward to it. My good friend and new friend, Nancy Sulla, has joined us and has put together another powerful team of educators to talk about things that are going on the educational front. And we do know that a lot of things are happening in that regard. So I'm looking forward to having this great conversation with her and the other educators that'll be joining in this conversation. I know that I was telling the folks at the International Broadcast Media Network that we were going to have this conversation and that it should be a very fascinating conversation because of all the things that are going on in the world revolving around education. As a matter of fact, just yesterday, there was a conversation about their fear here in North Carolina that there might be fewer students graduating and that there could be more falling behind because of setbacks brought on by the coronavirus pandemic and all of that. So there's going to be a huge gap in our students' path through education, is what Deputy State Superintendent David Segal told the General Assembly's Joint Legislative Education Oversight Committee on yesterday. These are going to be learning gaps that are going to take years to recover from. Without a doubt, as a parent, as an educator, it's obvious. So he definitely reported about 82% of the school districts have definitely reintroduced some in-person learning. As a matter of fact, I know that that's going on because I ran into a friend of mine who has got a student involved in the school system. I think the student is like around 7 or 8 years old, and they were actually feeling like that they might start talking to each other because they were over there dealing with trying to learn computers and all of that, and they've been doing that for a number of months. So definitely that's some of the things that are going on here in North Carolina. And as I've said, a lot of things are happening around education and things that are going on even with equity, because I do know my brother, having been involved in education and still involved in education, oftentimes talks about the gap that exists between our African American students and some of our other students, particularly with our male population. So these are all things that have been going on in the world even before the coronavirus, and the coronavirus apparently is adding to what is happening. So this is going to be a very in-depth and wonderful conversation. Of course, it's a dinner party, so we're going to have some fun with it as well, because I've also learned some great facts about my teacher friends that I have made and everything. So looking forward to that part of the conversation as well. But right now, I'm going to bring in my partner in crime on this whole thing, that being Nancy Sulla. Like I said earlier, I met her through our mutual friend, Sri Srinivasan. And of course, we have now done this for the second time. And who knows, we might try to do this as many times as possible, because we just love having these conversations, and education is a very vital part of all of our lives and everything, whether you're a young kid or whether you're an older person. Because I'm one of those people, and I think Nancy would agree with me as well, that we should always be trying to learn, no matter from the time that we're born until the time that we reach the end point. The education is something that we should be doing on a consistent basis. I know that I am always learning new things, even here in this platform. We're learning new tricks and new things that we can do and all of that. So Nancy, it's so great to see you again and to see you here on the screen with me. So it is truly great to see you here.
You and I are like twins separated at birth. You know, we just have a good time together, and are passionate about what we do, and also have those musical thread backgrounds, which are a lot of fun. So, you know, for a minute, I thought you were calling me old. You're talking about older people learning. So
no, never. I would never call you that. I'm not exactly in the spring chicken category either. But, you know, I learned one of the things recently, because I had, as I was telling y'all backstage, I did have Thanksgiving with my mom, with my younger brother, and with my two nephews. And at one point, the older nephew, Julius, was handing me the video games, because apparently there's some video games that he's very much engaged with and enjoying and everything. So he was having me pick the characters. And as one of my friends told me, he was actually just wanting to beat you in the game. What I forgot to tell my friend Ray was that I'm smart enough to know not to play him in the game. So I just picked the characters and let him play the game. So I just let him pick the characters.
That's good. That's good.
So definitely, yeah. What did you think about what I mentioned earlier? And I do want to bring in some of our other folks, including the incredible Adele, as well as Shane. And I'm going to do that right now. But what did you think about what I mentioned earlier when I talked about the fact that here in North Carolina, there is concern around things revolving around equity, and the fact that not every student is able to have access to computers, or they're not able to understand quite all of the computers that are going on. So we've been in the middle of this pandemic since March. So we're now getting ready to cross about the 9 months mark and everything. And it has definitely impacted what educators are doing. And that is definitely a field that you are in with equity and all of that. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about how folks are reacting, how the various states are reacting, and what you're learning from your own interactions with the various school systems.
Yeah, these are special times. And I began consulting with school districts, I don't know, decades ago now. So a lot of my energy has been around designing classrooms that build student engagement, empowerment, and efficacy. And what I was happy to see is that for our school districts that were running our learner active technology infused classrooms, when they switched to remote, the teachers, administrators reported, parents reported that it was not a problem at all for their kids. Like they just picked up and kept going. And so from that, I started thinking, all right, so what do we need to do in this remote world back in the spring? And just tweaked my framework a little bit. And what I've been saying to everyone is, we need to identify one way to teach. It doesn't matter if students are in school or at home, just one way. So one set of structures and strategies that work as well at home as they do in school. And in that case, we don't have to worry about opening or reopening or where. And so that starts to, and that model to begin with is much more of an equity model, providing students, and you'll hear Shanae talk more about it when she joins us, with the combination of both opportunity and access. But what I was really struck by is the struggle everyone is having now in this environment on the equity front. Now, there's two issues on equity. One, you mentioned, Mark, was the technology side, and absolutely, we have to get technology in place. And we work in some rural schools that they just can't get internet access to some of their students, so they're still delivering packets. But even with that, we came out with a professional development on how to build a better packet. Because at least if you're going to only send home packets to kids, like let's make them very meaningful, engaging, empowering, et cetera. But beyond that, where the schools, and I don't know of all of the schools in North Carolina and what they're going through, but I know a lot of school districts have managed to get computers into the hands of kids. The interesting thing is a lot are on back order. I have districts that have ordered Chromebooks that are just on back order. So we definitely have to come up with some other ways to engage students. But I think that we have an opportunity here. This is the way I look at it, and what I say to administrators. We have an opportunity to change education for the ages. Like everybody now has a felt need to figure out how to teach differently. So if we can just come up with a new way to go about teaching, even when we have a vaccine and schools go back in person, et cetera, we will have changed education. It should be more engaging. It should be more differentiated. It should allow students to take greater responsibility for learning. And that's all the work we've been doing with schools. And we know, at least when we go back, that, we'll be able to hit the ground running. But somebody said to me, what are we going to do when schools reopen? We have to catch up, and clear the gaps. And I said, if you are teaching the way I'm telling you to teach, there'll be no reopening. Like school is open now, and you will have as high quality instruction now as you will later. And I think that's what we have to really focus on. This isn't the time to get through. This is the time to do something different.
That makes a lot of sense.
That's my soapbox.
No, I appreciate the soapbox, and definitely I'm glad that you got on that and everything. And by the way, Amelia Van Larson, and I didn't catch the full name and everything, but she was saying that yes, we need to support and guide students in owning their own learning. And one of the things, and I do want to bring Shane into the conversation as well, but one of the things that I can tell you that one of our founders here, Nicholas Palveda, is always talking about, and even Kim, who's one of the founders of the IBM TV platform, is that they feel that sometimes that we're in an 18th century model with our education and not necessarily doing the 21st century things that we should be teaching. Like he's a big proponent of financial literacy and of learning a lot of other things that we're not teaching necessarily in our school system. So I was wondering if you could talk to our founders as well as others that might be listening about that and where the education leaders like yourself are with that, because they oftentimes bring it up here on our platform that they feel that we are like maybe 2 or 3 centuries behind where we should be in terms of our style of learning.
Definitely. And even if we look at, more recent history, hi, Shanae. Shanae is one of my co-hosts tonight who's joining us. She's our Director of Educational Equity at ID Corp. When I think of just recent history, the factory model, when factories came out, society in the second industrial revolution, society realized that, wow, we have the opportunity here to make this more efficient and more effective and more, fast. And so we started creating factory schools. I mean, even if you think about middle schools and high schools you visit, there's a math wing and a science wing and an art wing, and students move from room to room and we fill them with content, so that whole idea, and we have bells and we have supervisors. I mean, all of these things that are typical of a factory model that we've not moved away from. And it was interesting. I was in the field of teaching, and then in the late 70s, I decided to move into computer science at a time when people weren't going into computer science, and got my master's in computer science, was a programmer analyst, was living in a technology infused world. And then just woke up one day and said, you know what? My calling was to be in education. I don't belong out in the corporate world. I'm coming over into education. So I came back into education and saw that we weren't using technology well at all. So I began to infuse technology into the regular classroom environment and became a technology director and started to design these learner active technology infused classrooms that literally just change the game. It's putting kids in charge of their own learning. And I think that's what we need to do. And students today are capable of that. They're much more capable than we think. So that's why there's a part of me that it's a terrible thing to say, excited about the pandemic. I don't say that to too many people, but now I'm saying it to millions of viewers, I guess. So, but the exciting thing, if there's anything to say is exciting about a pandemic, is that it really has become the disruptor that provides us with the opportunity to change what teaching and learning look like. And if we miss that opportunity, shame on us, because we won't get it probably for a while again.
No, I definitely agree with you on that. And I definitely want to bring Shane into the conversation. I also want to bring our other lovely host, Adele, into what's going on as well. But Shane, one of the things that I wanted to ask you and everything, and I mentioned it earlier in our initial conversation, was the kind of gaps that are going on even within our minority communities, because there is a gap between what's happening with our particularly African-American males and their graduation rates and things of that nature. And I know that some of your talking points have been around that. So I would love for you to share a little bit about where we are with that and how it's impacting even what's going on with the pandemic. Because as I mentioned in the earlier part, here in North Carolina, there's been some reports of the graduation gaps could become wider because of what's happening here with the pandemic and the racial equity kind of conversations and everything else. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on this and where we are with it in that regards.
For sure. I think, and to one of Nancy's points, I really think it's linked a lot to engagement. And so of what kids are now doing. So if you're at home kind of just compliantly having to click through some things, submit some things, then the disengagement from school can become a very big issue in which, like, what is the point? What is the purpose of this sort of thing? But when we are truly engaging kids, differentiating, meeting them where they are, building those relationships through this screen, all of those things are really crucial to making sure that we are seeing all of our students, that we are recognizing them as people, that we are, cheering them on. We want them to be engaged in school. We're setting the purpose. We're making it an authentic and relevant experience for our students. Because when you become disengaged with it, then you're like, why am I putting forth this effort? And then you tend to drop out, because then it's like, okay, I could be working, or I could be doing this or this. Mm-hmm. So we have to, especially in this time when you are not like face to face with kids per se, or you might be at some, sometimes you have to be much more intentional about how am I reaching all of my students? How am I making learning authentic? How am I making it connected to who they are, connected to what they want to do? What do our students want to be or do when they graduate from high school? What is their life plan? What is their plan a year from now, 2 years from now? Do they want to go to college, vocational school, go into the workforce, start a business? Whatever the case may be, all of those things, we really have to embed that life experience for after this K-12 into K-12, because like you're in school for such a small fraction really of what your life can and will be. But we often like, oh, K-12, and then they're just out here and they're adults. But we need to make sure we're connecting those pieces so that we're giving legitimacy to why education and why school is important, and really why, especially as, young Black people, why education really is that doorway, that path that you really, no one can take that piece from you, and like how you are being resourced for walking out into this world. Like education is so critical to that success in so many different ways. It doesn't have to be formal, like college education. It could be a multitude of things. College is one of those things, but just even if you want to start that business, wanting to, do something in sports, or just there's a whole bunch of things. But I think that there's a level of disengagement now. And I think that the pandemic and going remote kind of did that, because people are just trying to get through. I'm just trying to get the content out to kids. I don't care what it looks like. I'm just trying to get them the information. Here's the math lesson. Without like, we have to really put forth much more energy to make sure it's engaging, authentic, and relevant. And I think that's how you start to reach kids, because they're like, oh, I'm worth this time. And it's not just me checking boxes and kind of compliantly going through it. But if we keep doing the same old thing, if we keep what this looks like, then yes, we're going to have kids who become disinterested because school is boring, and that should not be the case.
Oh, Sinead, that reminds me of what I just said about the pandemic. I think applies to school as well. School shouldn't be something that you get through in order to get on with life. Yeah. School should be something that really has you actively engaged in your life. And that's where, well, we put a lot of emphasis on engaging kids in solving real world problems and relevant problems in order to be engaged. And I think we need, and you also brought up a good point when you're talking about teachers just trying to kind of, get the content through. And I'm mindful of the fact that in speaking with a lot of superintendents, they're bringing their youngest students back full-time, face-to-face, they're half the classes in one room, half the classes in another. And they're allowing the high school students to be fully remote, thinking, well, because they can handle it. However, if we don't put as much energy and excitement into engaging them, I mean, we can have high school kids engaging in amazing real world problems right now, like collaboratives that are working together, and it's meaningful and it's a reason to log on because you and your partners are all kind of solving a big problem. And, our kids are all gamers. So it's like, it's the reality game, if you will. Let's look at a real world issue and try to tackle it together. That's what we need to do. We need to stop just delivering content, and we need to start facilitating the learning of kids.
And one of the things I was going to add to that, and like I said, I am going to bring Adele into the conversation as well. But
we have a few other speakers this hour.
We got plenty. We got lots of folks that I'm going to bring in. I'm going to bring Adele in as well. But one of the things I was curious about was that, do you think that we're doing a good enough job of engaging some of the other parts of the community? Like I said, I know that even here on this platform, a number of times we've talked about like entrepreneurs and other folks, and whether they were even before the pandemic being engaged enough in the school system, and even some of our musicians and some of our talent folks, whether we're doing a good enough job of engaging them so that folks can realize that they might be, after getting out of school, able to start their own business. But I don't know that they're seeing enough of those entrepreneurs in their own individual communities, whether that's New York, New Jersey, Texas, or wherever around the world, actually coming into the classrooms as much as they should. So I'll turn that over to you, Shane, and also I'd love to hear Adele's thoughts on that as well, because I'm thinking that maybe we're not engaging enough of our other community aspects on. So I'd love to hear you talk about that and where you feel things are going in that regard.
For sure.
Mark, though, you have to call her Shanae. See that accent on the E? Because we have a gentleman who works at our company called Shane, and every time you say Shane, I'm looking around like, is Shane here?
Shanae, I apologize for the mispronunciation.
No worries. I blame my parents who are probably watching for that accent. So now they hear it live. When Keith Bailey comes on later, because I know that he is very much a proponent about bringing in the community, because I think that especially now, like that connection between school, home, and community, that line has blurred completely. And so we have to now And it's easier, frankly, to be able to bring in, if I want kids to be able to talk to an entrepreneur or an architect, like, let's get that Zoom link and have somebody come into the small group and share with some kids who have that same interest. So it's not even so much now that people have to be disruptive and come to school and take the day and all these different things, but there's actually ease of access with social media, with technology, to be able to bring in different community leaders, different, parent caregivers that have these different experiences to share and talk about the things that they do, how schooling has helped support them, what is it, the problems and things that they're solving. So it's easy now to really be able to make that connection. It's just a matter of, again, we have to be doing something differently. So thinking about my curriculum in a different way. Because I taught math, so that's always my frame. Within this lesson, who does this connect to? Who can I bring in that might want to talk about a little bit of this as well? Also, I saw that we have a comment, my former coworker, Kim Jeter, who I love very dearly. But in their magnet, they bring in a lot of different careers and people to come in and talk to kids related to their passions. And that's the stuff that excites kids, like, oh, I can do that. I see how that is connected to this. I'm going behind the scenes at the zoo to see what they do really, like how is the math and the science and all of that integrated. I need to write this report or what's going like. And so being able to make those connections is super powerful. And kids remember that experience. Therefore, they remember the learning. But we have to be intentional about putting those things in place. Like, let me make an effort to reach out and see who is in my community that I can lean on, leverage for their skill set, their knowledge, and bring it in to my classroom. I think it's easier to get access. We just have to open the door to do it and really think and do something differently.
No, definitely agree. You have to open the doors, and I definitely want to hear from Adele and her thoughts on that as well. But I can tell you that, yes, definitely Zoom and these kind of platforms have made it a lot easier, because I know that before the pandemic, I went and had a whole conversation around media, podcasts, and things of that nature. And as I have told many of y'all on before, and other folks know here on this platform, I am not a driver, so I depend on mass transit, and it was a challenge getting to the school because the school was not nearby. So now if they want to have me have a conversation, all they got to do is reach me. I'll send them a link, and we can do it right here, right now. And like I said, it can be done in these kind of contexts without me trying to juggle the bus to get to Jordan High School, which is the high school that I was going to at that particular time. And it was definitely a journey getting there. But Adele, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I'm living my best life keynoting from Florida. Go ahead. Back to Adele.
Adele, I'd love to hear your thoughts about some of the things that we've been talking about, including getting folks engaged, including like some of the artistic community and other people that are definitely trying to do things within the education system. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. And I think that Shanae did mention to me both Mr. Bailey and one of the other gentlemen as well. So I'm going to bring them into the course of the conversation. And then I want Nancy to introduce them. And of course, she's given me some talking points about some of their things in life as well. But I've got my core team right here, since y'all were on the first education, but we're going to bring in some new blood as well. But Adele, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Again, sitting here listening to Nancy and Shanae, I think we start to parrot each other's words, because we all seem to think alike or kind of recognize the same kind of needs that are occurring during this pandemic time, especially around learning. But again, to piggyback on what Shanae was just talking about, I think that authentic experience for kids, youngsters, as well as teenagers and young adolescents, in terms of career opportunities is so important. They see home life, they see school life, and then they see whatever they're eligible to see or available to see in their community. But by bringing in people, and now particularly on Zoom, I can say to you, it's been interesting for me to talk to other instructors of even our adult ed classes that I'm preparing principals for. They've had some national experts being able to come into their online classes to talk, whereas normally these online national experts charge a fortune to do a keynote in a conference or whatever, but they're certainly willing to interact. But for students in a school situation, seeing those actual careers, particularly ones that they don't know about or see regularly or even understand to experience are so critical. I'll just give you a little bit of an example. I have a relationship with a playhouse in New Jersey, and we're redesigning those educational offerings for those students. And even though we're talking about theater arts performances and playwriting and literacy kind of aspects and, music and dance and things like that, we've started to talk a lot about what do the behind the scenes, not jobs, but positions or opportunities exist for kids, costume design, the theater mechanics of, the engineering of stage sets and things like that, and offering kids behind the stage looks virtually to get them interested in different kinds of careers. So both bringing people into your classroom experience and when we're allowed again to kind of get out there, offering kids authentic experiences is critical. We all know that we talk about college and career. We all, now hear free community college, tuition for everybody, and that we're funneling kids to a higher ed experience. I can recall I had a second grader a number of years back who kept saying to me, I know I have to go through school, but I'd rather go to work. Can you help me get a job? This young man was 7. And, we already kind of had him set on a path that he was working with someone in an office, helping them at night, doing different kinds of things, and he was loving it. And I'm not discounting the school experience because I kept encouraging him, you need to have the great math skills and language arts skills and be able to read and write and communicate. But he was already thinking in a different mindset of being either an entrepreneur or how do I get there? How do I get to be one of those people? Right, and, we were able to kind of guide him at that young age into areas that he would be interested in, reading books about different careers and things like that. So, a long time ago as well, I had a bunch of people coming into a middle grades experience. We had a federal court judge. We had a state senator. We had, someone who owns a Fortune 500 company. So the opportunities for kids to kind of interact and ask questions with those kinds of individuals is important because they wouldn't have that opportunity but for what teachers create. So through this virtual environment, again, through engagement and through those kind of creative experiences that teachers work magic with now through the screen, the opportunities for kids to explore different career options is really phenomenal, and it's important. It's the next stage of our world's, tasks to be done. I mean, we still need plumbers, we still need, engineers and electricians, but they're going to operate in a very different world, right? In an electronic kind of world. And kids need to be able to see what those fields look like.
I would definitely agree with you on that and everything. Unfortunately, sometimes because of what's going on, even in our theater community, some of those programs that were created are now also, unfortunately, on the cutting block. Because I know that even here in Durham, we just announced that the Carolina Theater, which is one of our local theaters here in Durham, North Carolina, is actually going to be shut down until the end of the fiscal year, or the beginning of next fiscal year. So shut down until like June 30th or something like that. There is hope that they will be able to, bring it back earlier than that. But because of what's going on with the pandemic, but I know that Noelle James, who was involved in creating these kind of education programs within the theater, she is one of those folks that was laid off. So the whole future of what's going to happen with that is kind of in play right now, because right now there was a whole program that she had set up. A lot of folks were doing things like you were talking, Adele, where they were getting whole plays presented to them and getting them in their home environment. But now because of the state of that particular theater, and that's a lot of theaters, I imagine even there in New Jersey and New York, that those kind of opportunities are not happening as much as we would like. But hopefully there'll be ways that folks can juggle it and still create it, even if they've got to do it on a contract basis or some other kind of basis. But that is the other dilemma that we have happening, is that folks are being laid off in the theater world, which then impacts them being able to supply stuff to you educators.
Yeah.
But I did want to bring in Mr. Bailey, so I'm going to bring in Mr. Bailey, and Nancy can tell me more about him as well as Gary. So. Oh, no, hold on.
Mr. Bailey.
There we go.
Mr. Bailey, how are you?
Great. How are you?
I'm all right. So Keith here is thank you. Keith is the executive director and the founder of PD, Math Science Technology Academy in South Carolina. And I know, Keith, I mean, what fascinates me too is that you also mentor entrepreneurs in Kenya. So I think that's very cool. So maybe you could weigh in. You've been listening. So what are some of your thoughts about instructional equity?
And why you started PD. I think that's the power in your story too.
And how you started PD.
Yeah, I would love to hear both
Take
of those
right
stories
over,
for
Mr.
sure.
Bailey.
For sure, Mr. Bailey, I'd love to hear both of those. Just to give you a little bit of background about some things that are going on. There's actually a gentleman that has been on my regular audio podcast who's doing a lot of work in that same field. He and his wife actually have one of the only few Zimbabwean restaurants in the world. So he is an entrepreneur named Leonardo William, and his wife is Zweli. So they have the restaurant called Zweli's, and they actually had the pleasure of being at one of those debates between Biden and Trump. They were sitting in the front row. So he's doing a lot of that same kind of work that you're doing. So one of the things I'm going to do as I hear more about you is I'm going to find a way to connect you to Mr. Williams, because I know he's doing a whole kind of like Buy Black movement as well as a number of other things, but he is a leading entrepreneur in the community. So I'm going to find a way to connect you there in South Carolina with him here in Durham, North Carolina. But they're going to go on a global tour because, like I said, his wife is from Zimbabwe. They met on the college campus. And then Shanae and Nancy and Adele, you'll get a kick out of this. When I was talking to him, apparently he got kicked to the curb the first time that he met his wife because he was already in a relationship. She knew he was in a relationship. He tried to step to her when he was in a relationship, and she was not having that. So she kind of like put him to the curb and everything. And several years later, they have met, gotten married, and are running a very successful business. But as he put it, and he was honest, he said he had to grow up. So even though he's a young man, I think in his 30s or maybe late 30s, early 40s, he had to grow up in order to actually get the queen that he needed in his life. So that's what he needed to do, was do some growing up.
That's great.
But Mr. Bailey, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, listen, I've been enjoying the conversation, and wow, let's see, where do I start? Because this is indeed not only a hot topic, but a needed topic, and getting to the opportunity to work with Shanae and Nancy, I think we were a little ahead of the game, really looking at knowing that there needs to be a change in education, particularly for the students we serve. And so I do serve as the leader of a rural charter school in South Carolina. And Shanae would tell you, there's never a dull moment at PD. There's always some great things happening. And I love it. I love it because I quickly understood that students are not the problem. Students that we serve, they are ready to learn. They come every day with expectation. And oftentimes we find that we may not be meeting that expectation. And they are honest and they are frank and they are candid to tell you, Mr. Bailey, that lesson or this structure is just not working for me. And so earlier on when we started the school to meet a need in what has been coined as the corridor of shame in South Carolina. And there's a study that was done some time ago, and we've changed that name to a corridor of opportunity. So along the I-95 corridor, predominantly 70% minority and impoverished communities. And when we started back in 2013, and most everyone I spoke to they asked me, why are you putting a charter school in the middle of nowhere? And I said, why not? Because there are students that deserve high quality education. And fast forwarding to getting to meet IDE and Nancy, and then our good friend Shanae, really helping us to take what we felt in our gut that should be different about education, because the blessings of a charter school is you don't have to do it the way it's been done. And to have a charter school, it's saying that you are expecting that you're going to do something different and offer something different that's not being offered. But how do you do that? There's so many things you can do. There's so many options and things you could do. But one of the biggest lessons I learned with Shanae that she drilled into our thinking is that as a STEAM school, as we started a STEM as a STEAM school. And she said, Mr. Bailey, you have to understand that STEM is not stuff. It's a way of thinking. And that was just a mind shift for us. What does that mean? Because often you think of a STEM school, you want to see computers and 3D printers, which we have, and you just want to get gadgets and we spend money. But it really doesn't impact the students in the way that we want to impact them through critical thinking and knowing how to apply their learning to be problem solvers. And when we begin to look at how can we change our curriculum to expose our students to opportunities, we quickly found out that being rural doesn't have to be a deficit or a life sentence of death or doom, but they can cycle out through education. That education is the 21st century civil rights issue. We have to find a way to get quality education to all students. And I'm telling you, I've not met a group of people to really know that fundamentally as I have with IDE. And so hats off to Nancy and her group. And if we could still Shanae, we would, but this hasn't happened.
No.
Haven't grabbed it yet, but still working on it. Looks like it, everything. So Nancy's shaking her head and everything along that line. I would love to hear from you, Mr. Bailey. And I do want to bring in, because Dr. Carey was actually the first one that was here when I came into the studio and everything. So I do want to bring in Dr. Carey and, of course, Gary as well. And I think we got one or two others. But I did have a quick question for you. A lot of times folks are hearing about charter schools, and I am actually a proponent of charter schools. I actually went to school at Marquette with Howard Fuller, who is a leading proponent of charter schools, but sometimes folks also are not the biggest fan of charter schools. I was just wondering if you could talk about your thoughts on charter schools and their place within the educational system. Because like I said, Howard Fuller, who was one of the reasons that I got to Marquette University, has then since begun a whole career as being a supporter of charter schools.
Well, obviously, as a leader of a charter school, I am definitely an advocate of charter schools. And I believe that if it had not been, I can only speak from my experience, for PD in our area, that many of our parents would have no other option. For example, the local school district, it is a traditional district. They have had struggles, as many schools do, in rural areas. The other option for parents in our area was a private school, and for an impoverished area, that isn't an option. And so as a charter school, we were able to offer a tuition-free public education in an unconventional, innovative way that then met the need and meets the needs of those parents that otherwise would have become another statistic. And so absolutely, I think charter schools, it all has to do with who's leading the charter school and the purpose for why they have come together. And I think parents, they deserve a choice, and that's what we've given to our parents. So, yeah,
that part, Keith, that all kids and the leadership matters. Like, your why for starting is that is the power. For sure.
Yeah. That's very much a good power. And by the way, we've been having some great comments from some of Nancy's friends and some of the other folks that are watching and everything. So I've been sharing some of them, but I wanted to share some of them to the screen and everything. So Tanya Basco was saying that love these thought leaders. Their focus on empowering students is so powerful and gives us all hope. So that was one of the comments that folks said and everything. And then we've also got one from Marissa Schamer, who said that they are definitely loving this. Let's listen to the kids. They'll tell us how we're doing. Their expectations of education shouldn't be higher than ours. I would definitely agree with that as well. Yeah. Definitely, that is a great quote from her and everything. And then Kimberly Jeter said, yes, the power of the tongue, the corridor of opportunity. So definitely was sharing that. And you mentioned STEAM, and actually one of our guys on the platform is Rakesh, and he has a thing called math and science. So he's trying to do it, but in another part of the world. I think that he's in one of the Asian countries or things of that nature. But sometimes folks are oftentimes fascinated by STEAM because they want to add extra letters. And if you could talk about what STEAM is, because a lot of folks know that the art is in there as well as engineering. But I've heard that it being spelled with 2 E's and 2 A's. Which, if you know spelling, that's not STEAM, that's some other word. But they've come up with another word where they try to add things. But I'd love to hear your talks about what STEAM is. But before you get into that, Tanya Bosco was saying that STEAM is a way of thinking. It's all about opportunity and access, and that she loved the comment, education is a 21st century civil rights movement. And I would agree with that as well. But I would love to hear all of y'all's thoughts on STEAM and the impact of STEAM. And then, like I said, Nancy, I'm going to bring in Gary as well as Dr. Carey. So
Gary
Dr.
and
Carey first. Yep.
Hello, Gary.
There's Carey. Like I said, Carey was with me at the beginning. She was the first one in the studio, but she didn't come into like number 6 in the whole stream. But I was feeling she was feeling a little left out, so she was the early bird to the camp and everything. So if we're doing that whole camp analogy and everything, she was the early bird, but we didn't bring her in till now. So Nancy, share who Carey is, and I'll also bring in Gary as well.
Are you bringing in Gary at the same time, or we got Gary there? Okay. Hey there. So first of all, I think that we have to have a round of applause for Dr. Carey Gentner, who is just a doctor now, 2 weeks old. Is that what you are?
Yeah, just a baby doctor.
Baby doctor. and definitely I want her to share her research study, which was on equity and which was fascinating. And Gary is, I was just going to use that adjective old. I'm not going to do that. Gary.
That's okay.
Gary and Adele have run the streets together. So Adele, I'm going to let you give us more of Gary's background.
Oh, sure. Gary is a wonderfully proficient and expert educator. He was a high school principal in Princeton, New Jersey, which is a prestigious town, and was there, Gary, right, 17 years as principal?
About 16 and a half, yeah.
Okay. He was a principal in Massachusetts and some other places as well.
I counted up that he was like in about 7 or so different states before
he's covering the whole kind of,
We're not
United
sure who
States.
He's running from, but
it's who I'm chasing, Nancy. My wife keeps moving, so I just keep following.
Yeah, his wife just accepted a position at is it
Virginia
Give
Tech?
Me the university.
Virginia Tech.
Right. So he's now relocated to
That's where you
Virginia,
are.
but we're still collaborating and working together on projects in New Jersey.
Seems like the silver lining of the pandemic.
That's right.
Yeah, really. But I mean, this is not an educational tip, but I think you'd appreciate this. Gary moved to Virginia, sight unseen, bought a house online, having not seen it. So talk about risk taking and using the power of the medium during this time to accomplish a great new feat. Kudos to Gary and his wife. But yes, Gary's been teaching a lot of things with us in a lot of different places.
And I have a specific question I want to ask of Gary, but first I'm going to ask Dr. Gentner. Whenever Carrie and I get together, we're like, Doctor? So I want to ask you if you could. I want to ask you, right? Shanae's going to be here soon, and then it'll be Doctor. Carrie, can you summarize in a few minutes, like what you found in your dissertation research? Because I thought it was fascinating.
Nancy asked if I could, speak extemporaneously from my dissertation, and
without slides,
I have it here. It's there. That's
By
it.
the way, you know it better than anyone else.
I was like, yeah, I think I can, but I still like to have it here next to me to see it. But basically what I did was I researched, in Florida, we have this law that if you're a school, elementary school, scores within the lowest 300 in the state, according to the state standardized test, you're given an additional hour, you're mandated an additional hour of reading instruction for your students. So the lowest 300 schools have an additional hour, and this has been happening since 2012. And so I looked to see where those schools were. So my investigation was about geography, demographics, and then also the curricula. So I looked to see where these things were happening. And we have 67 districts in Florida, 33 of them have low 300 schools. And of those, 8 of them, whenever I did the statistical analysis, poverty was the second factor, only to the rate of minoritized students for predicting if you are going to be in those low 300 schools. So for 8 districts, the number of minoritized students was your greatest predictor for being a low 300 school. So I studied the curricula used in those 8 districts, and I looked at the demographics of the districts. Not surprisingly, they were very high rates of poverty, high numbers of minoritized students, and grouped, so clustered together. So I did GIS sampling with that and found that there's some segregation going on, and also that the curricula that they're using is pretty biased and just not high quality. So one of the things that, for example, in every single one of the curriculums used, there were more animal characters than minoritized characters. So students that are in a school with 99% minoritized individuals are seeing more bears, dogs, cats in their reading books than they are seeing a person that looks like them. So hopefully, as I start publishing from my dissertation and doing some white papers and sharing this information with the school districts that are using these materials, we can enact some change around what kind of content our students are seeing. But also, themes that are not universal to all cultures. So themes of like retaliation and individualism and capitalism were very prominent, as opposed to themes of cooperation, family, respect for the earth, respect for elders. Those are less frequently seen. So it was definitely very interesting. It only scratched the surface. I feel like there's so much more to investigate. But one of the things that, as Keith was speaking, that I thought about, the good thing about charter schools is you don't have to go with what the district recommends. So in Florida, the district says we're doing, X, Y, and Z reading series. If you're a charter school, you can say, well, we're not. We're going to do something that's more appropriate for our students. So that is definitely a plus of the charter schools. So that's my dissertation in a nutshell.
Thank you, Dr.
Great. And by the way, and I do want Nancy, I know, got some other questions, as do I as well. But one of the things I was going to say is that, one, if anybody did not see that book, they need to have you lift it up again, because I know some folks that have done their dissertation, and that was definitely a big publication about the size of some encyclopedias and things of that nature. So definitely that was a lot of work that you put into that. But when you were doing that, I did have done, and mentioned it on this platform as well as some of the other things that I've been engaged in, have done work in the education field, but more as a grader. One of the companies I work with is a company called Measurement Incorporated. It's one of the leading testers in the country and everything of that nature. But as a grader, I'm going to tell you there are things that they go on in the grading that I don't necessarily agree with, but I'm getting paid by them, so I just play by the rules, as they say, and everything. That being said, do you think that there's enough equity even in some of the test creation? I have my opinion, but I'd love to hear from the educators and whether that came up in your studies, because I do sometimes think that some of the students that might be, say, coming from an urban area, some of those questions might not be the same. And I also know that a lot of times creativity isn't rewarded by some of those education tests, because, a lot of times we're told to put those little creative stories that are wonderful poems and wonderful raps aside because they didn't follow the rules of what they were supposed to be doing, even though they might have had some of the most ingenious performances ever.
Yeah, so it came up sort of in that, so I didn't look exactly at the test, at the Florida Standard Assessment, but the idea that I was going from was Louise Rosenblatt's theory of reading response theory. And she says that you have to first engage with a text aesthetically before you can engage with a text efferently. So you have to have like some connection, some felt need, some purpose to reading a text before you can then learn comprehension skills on that text. So if you're reading something that you don't have any schema for, any background knowledge for, your brain's working overtime to try to just make these connections. And then your teacher's also trying to teach main idea. And you're like, what? I can't even wrap my head around this thing that's going on the pages. Like, I'm trying to understand why there's a talking bear here. Like, I can't understand main idea right now. So if then what I'm thinking is, so Gloria Ladson-Billings writes about culturally relevant pedagogy. And quick shout out, that's my grand chair. So my dissertation chair, her dissertation chair was Gloria Ladson-Billings. So I feel like I'm like kind of like in a little family royalty here. So she, when she writes about culturally relevant pedagogy, then if we're bringing in culturally relevant materials for students to read, they're not having to work as hard to make a connection, and now they can learn those comprehension skills. So even though I agree the tests are probably biased, I didn't study that necessarily, but I'm guessing they are. When they go to read that, they already have those comprehension skills and they can start trying to attack that text. But if we can't even get them to aesthetically read in the first place, like we're already missing them at the very beginning. So I feel like there's these layers that we need to attack. And so if we can attack the curriculum first and then get to the test and then, up and up, again, blessings in disguise. Nobody would ever wish for COVID, but yay, we don't have to take FSA down here. So that's 2 years without standardized tests in Florida, and it's pretty good.
Thank you, Dr. Denver, for ticking off the State Department of Florida in so many ways. And to Marc for ticking off his sponsor. So, Gary, I guess you're up next.
I'll try
I
not to
didn't
pick
mention
anybody else.
specific curriculums that were biased over here.
That's a good one. Well, and Gary, I loved, a comment when you and I were talking about, one of the authors that you love, Paulo Freire, and him writing The Pedagogy of the Oppressed. How many of us have read the book? And Pedagogy of Freedom. So, Gary, weigh in on your thoughts on the instructional equity quest based on your immense background.
Oh, thank you. It's good to be here. And Carrie, by the way, I saw Gloria Ladson-Billings yesterday. She was a keynote presenter here in Virginia, sponsored by the Department of Ed, and they're doing work on equity, and she was a keynote. So she had great words to share yesterday. So it was funny that you brought her up today.
Oh, she's just amazing.
Connections. The universe brings us all together.
Yeah, she's very
the universe
amazing.
is all about connections. That's what it's about. I definitely want to hear what Gary's got to say. By the way, we also have some comments. I need to bring those up as Gary is talking. But Lauren was saying, Keith, I love how you said all children deserve a high quality education. Yes, that is equity. And then Roxanne also had a comment, which is, wow, Dr. Gettner, those are some amazing facts. So they were already checking out your facts and things of that nature. And then we've got another one for Mr. Bailey as well. So Andrea Bailey, I'm thinking that might be somebody related to you and everything.
Oh, wow.
Mr. Bailey always teaches the students at the school as his priority. So definitely, it's always great when you got the support of folks in your life. And then last but not least, Lauren Frankenskin said that, Carrie, what a call to revise curriculum. So definitely I would agree that we need to revise curriculum. And we even talked about that in the early part of this whole conversation and things of that nature. But Gary, I'm turning it back over to you.
Well, good. Thanks. Marc, I'll go way back to your comments about perhaps our instruction is a couple of centuries behind. I don't even think we have to go back that far, right? And talk about 20th century instruction. And that's where, Nancy reminds me of Paulo and the pedagogy of the oppressed. And the idea of a teacher standing in the front of the room and presenting to passive students is an idea that is 20th century, 19th century. It's well past. And so, as you were saying, 21st century should have collaboration. It should allow for critical thinking. It should allow for problem solving. And yes, no one would wish for us to be in this pandemic, and yet it does give us an opportunity to approach things in different ways. And so earlier in the conversation, someone was saying that if teachers or if we're simply trying to replicate that 20th century teaching and learning through this computer by, still handing and passing and giving information to students as they sit passively, that's the banking model that Freire talked about, right? And it's not what we should be doing in the 21st century. A pedagogy of freedom has students digging into problems and real world problems. I think it was Shanae was talking along this earlier that if we can't come up with real world problems, we're not trying very hard. So, and our students can come up with those problems. They can identify what it is that they want to study and they want to learn. And Carrie, that's some of what Gloria was saying yesterday. She was along that same line of, listen to the students and allow them to have this voice and what it is that they're concerned about, and as opposed to always the adults telling them, okay, here's what we need to learn and here's how we're going to do it. And so I think some of those structures can change. My mind actually often thinks in terms of structures, and the structure of kids going to school every day has been interrupted. It has been disrupted. And again, as much as we all miss that and want to be back and be with kids and be with our colleagues, disrupting that structure should allow us to step back and think of things and think of these problems in different ways. And I was thinking earlier, you were talking about engagement and how that happens. Yeah, if I'm trying to engage 25 kids through this Zoom, computer, that's difficult. But why does it have to be 25? Because somebody said, oh, Gary, here's your block of time. Here's your block of students. Here's when and what you have to do. But now we're in a different world. Maybe I don't need all 25 at once, but if we're working on a problem, it's just 5. And so thinking about engagement earlier, if I met with 5 teams of 5 on the problem that they were working on, they're probably more likely to be engaged and have that relationship with me and with each other. And we don't have to measure the seat time. We don't have to count the hours that they're here in front of us. And so those are some of my thoughts. It goes back to early in the conversation when you were talking about, the folks are worried about kids who were missing in schools, who are not logging on, who are not attending. That's the worry of a report that came out yesterday. The students who are engaged in schooling, they're still doing nearly as well as they were before pandemic. That's a national report that came out yesterday. But there's a large percentage, and it's our minority students, Black and brown students, who are more likely to not be engaging through the, whether it's remote or hybrid, whatever it might be. And so I think there are ways to do that. And I think there are ways to have the engagement.
Nancy, just really quickly, this is for everybody on here. We are in here on the International Broadcast Media, a global platform and everything. So definitely, I'm always concerned about what's going on here in the United States and everything of that nature. But could you share some of the things that might be common to other folks that are watching that are from other parts of the globe? Because I do know that we have listeners and folks that are engaged that are in other parts of the globe that are facing some of these same issues. So I would love to hear your perceptions of some of the common things that might be happening both here, happening in England, happening in South Africa, happening in the various corners of the globe. So definitely, I would like us to definitely keep some of the conversation going with all the tremendous troubles that we're having here. But I do think that a lot of these troubles also happen in other parts of the globe. So I was just wondering if any of the folks here, and I'm also going to bring in 2 of your other guests, which is Joanne and Penelope. But I was definitely getting ready to bring them in and everything. But I would love to hear y'all's thoughts on how these conversations can be engaged in a global world, because we are in a global world. Even the issues that we're facing here in the United States oftentimes impact people all throughout the world.
Yeah, I do think that, again, an interesting outcome of the pandemic is it has brought all of us in the world of education closer together. And, schools around the world have had to close. We're right now working with a company, working through a platform called Princeton Hive to design self-paced courses for teachers in India on remote instruction, because India is probably going to stay remote for a while. And so we've been talking with different people in different countries about, we're all really going through the same thing right now. And sales of my book on executive function are up because everyone is realizing that when students go into a remote environment, if they don't have the executive function skills they need to be able to focus and shift attention from one thing to another and be able to plan and manage, they're going to be lost. And so I do think that we're just hearing a global conversation, that, and more when I present, every now and then I do some free Zoom sessions to just share ideas. I'm finding a much greater international audience because everyone is now saying like what to do.
Definitely.
And
love to hear some of your thoughts.
The way I'd kind of planned out the night here is we have these three different time slots, so that I was asking people to commit to particular time slots. But before we move on to the next time slot, because I know we used up some time in the beginning just kind of getting started, I would like to hear more from Keith and Carrie and Gary about their insights maybe into, if we could change the world, that's my thing, change the world. Like, what could we do better to achieve equity in school? Keith, you're on.
Wow, I have a lot of thoughts about that. If money was not an issue, if technology infrastructures was not a barrier, there's just a lot. My mind just, and Shanae would tell you, I have poster boards everywhere because I'm always creating and thinking. But realistically, I do believe if we can find a connection with our policymakers and our educators and really find a way that we can listen to each other, because oftentimes our policymakers are trying to solve issues from one end, but not really understanding the journey to get there or the root of the issues, perhaps, if that's a way to look at it. And so I think that's one approach. How can we get the meeting of the minds, because oftentimes we have initiatives that are given to educators that we have to meet these expectations, but oftentimes we find it is counterproductive to what's actually happening on the ground. So that's one thing. The other thing is, how can we listen? Because I used to say this, and I'll stop talking because I would like to hear Gary. I used to say that we have to be the voice to the voiceless. And so that could be offensive to those who may say, what if I can't speak? And so it was really an analogy, but I think everybody is saying something. Is more so, how do we develop the skills to listen? How do we listen? How do we become better listeners to our community? And I think, and I'll end with this, that's become one of the successes for our school. Even though we are a small school and we have limited resources, the ability to stop and listen to our parents, our students, it has allowed us to be ahead of potential issues if we had not listened. So how can we change and allow students to cooperate with their learning and collaborate with us in building a learning model that works for them? Personalization, I think, is really where it's at. So those are my thoughts.
Awesome. Mm-hmm.
Gary?
Wow, a lot to think about. And I'm just pulling together all the different ideas and thinking about slowing down, right? Before the pandemic and when I was a high school principal, we were on the treadmill. It just kept going faster and faster and faster. And so, Keith, when we talk about we want to listen, that's dialogue, and that takes time. And for then me to reflect and to react to that, and to do that with our students and to do that with our community, I think it's really taking a closer look at the way we were doing school before. And there were many of us trying to make changes then because we knew it was, we were just grinding and students there was no joy in the work. They were doing well, but there wasn't joy in the work. And so thinking of ways to bring back that joy. And I think what this pandemic is also teaching us is how much we need each other and rely on each other. And it's not, education's not about an individual, and it's not about me doing well on the test and me doing well and going off to a great college. It's about us, and it's about all of us as a community working together. And I think we're seeing that, and I think we're seeing examples of that in these difficult times. I think people are noticing how much schools do. The schools, I just saw an article yesterday, schools are feeding thousands and thousands of kids across this country, that where no one really noticed where food sources were coming from in this country, and it's coming through schools. Schools are providing, and so healthcare and all those pieces. These are community issues, and so I think if we can think about school in that manner and not this drive of steep time, and I'm not opposed to standards, but focus on standards and focus on tests. I'm not opposed to tests either, but there's space for that, and I think we need that space. And it'll be the second time tonight I use the word grace. I think we just need to work as a community and have the dialogue in a way that allows that kind of education to happen.
Gary, when I was a young teacher many years ago, and I was teaching middle school students math, and none of them had passed the state tests. And, and I was trying, I was a new teacher, so I was trying, okay, everybody take out your books. Who nobody has a book? Okay, take out a paper. Nobody has any paper. How about a pen? What do you guys do all day in school? I was like, what am I going to do? So I said to them, look, tomorrow I want everybody to come to class. No books, no pen, no paper. Just bring your bodies to class. So, of course, they all showed up. Yeah. And I had the chairs in a circle. And I said to them, this isn't working. I'm a new teacher. I want to keep my job. In order for me to keep my job, you have to pass the state tests. You need to pass the state tests and need to, be able to have these skills in life. So how are we going to make math class work? And they said oh, Ms. Sulla, math is so boring. So I said, all right, well, what are we going to do about it? And then they finally came up with the idea that, well, maybe if we did projects. So I said, all right, I'm going to do projects. We're going to put together projects. So, had not heard about problem-based learning, but was kind of inventing it over parallel universes, I guess. And started coming up with these real world problems that the kids solve. My kids were so engaged, so excited, so in. And what was interesting is when the state test came, all but one passed it. And so my principal brought me into his office and said, so your kids did very well on the state tests. And I said, well, thanks. I'm very proud of them. And he said, yeah, so tell me, did you cheat? You cheated, right? And I said, I didn't cheat. And then he said, well, maybe you walked around pointing and saying, just check that answer again. I said, no, I sat up at the desk. I, was watching them take the test. They didn't get any help from me. Maybe they just know the math. So he said, well, how is that possible? So then he said, well, your class outperformed the regular ed kids, the rest of the school in percentages. So how did you teach that chapter? And this is one of the favorite moments of my life, because I said to him, oh, I didn't get to that chapter. So literally, think about that. I did not formally teach percentages. My kids outperformed the rest of the school. And I said, you know what? I'm a percentages kind of a gal. If I were in my happy place, I'd be in a casino at a craps table. And so I feel like because I engaged them through real world problems, because I listened to them, because I let them redesign the class, they always had a felt need to learn. And they were asking me, well, how do you do that? How do you do that? And I'm sure in my facilitation, because I saw my role as, I like to say, curator and facilitator, which, I think is so important. And I'm sure I would ask kids, well, what percentage of the time would, and then they would say, well, how do you figure that out? What does that mean? So I think it's, I did that in the 70s. And I really think we need to just remember today that, as you said, if we listen to the students, they can probably design a better learning environment than we have,
No doubt about that. And by the way, we've got some more comments, including one from the IBM TV family and everything. But before we get to that, Rowena McNally was saying, thank you, Gary. We are lucky to have Dr. Sulla. She is the guru of real world, authentic problems and projects. So definitely give you that kind of notice and everything. And then Kimberly G said that 2020 in its entirety has given teachers so much real world situations to connect to content, data collection, graphs, democratic process, etc. And then, like I said, our folks over there at the International Broadcast Media Network were saying that they are enjoying what we're doing, and it is a very cool dinner party here. So they are definitely enjoying this, and I know that they oftentimes do talk about these issues even on some of their other programming, because as I've mentioned a couple of times, they are feeling that we are behind in what we should be doing in terms of creating, and it's not just in education, but in a number of things, creating 21st century, having 21st century problems, but 18th century solutions or 17th century solutions. And that's in a number of things, not just in education, but in a lot of aspects of the world. I think that they might even argue that some of our things in medicine might even be going in that regards as well. So definitely we've got to find a way to get back into the more modern time. But definitely, I agree with them that there is a great panel, and I know that we've got some other folks that we want to bring in as well. But definitely, I agreed with everything that y'all have said. And by the way, as I've told Nancy before, I do come out of the world of education, not just that testing company that I've done work with, which I understand we might be having a project coming up in next year, but it'll be a smaller one. But there may be some work in testing coming up because a lot of folks have not been doing testing, but there are some states and some situations that there may be a few projects. But my parents, my mother was a guidance counselor. I have aunts that were teachers in the school system. So education has always played a part of my life. And I also believe that a lot of us, even that aren't in the classrooms, are teachers to a lot of folks, because I think that there are tremendous mentors to a lot of folks that aren't necessarily having the title of teacher, because I think that a lot of folks are teachers in other ways as well, and I consider myself to be one of those. So definitely just wanted to share that also. But Nancy,
you can tell the producers that they're with the cool kids here. And Carrie, as we close out the 4:00 hour, although I could stay on with you guys for 3 hours, but you get the last word, Carrie.
Oh, well, so when Keith was talking about policymakers, right, and really engaging with policymakers to change.
You said her favorite word, policy.
I love policy. Policy and curriculum. Love it because I'm cool. So he mentioned that they're trying to solve problems, but they're not they're coming up with these solutions, but they're not aware of these unintended consequences, right? So one of the things that my dissertation committee was not too pleased with was my mixed methods use in my dissertation, because they're very qualitative, and I used a lot of quantitative information. And the whole reason was that's what policymakers respond to. So they respond to facts and figures. And so if I want to feel like I can influence them, I need to speak their language and be able to tell a story through the maps and the graphs and the things like that I'm able to create. So I totally agree, Keith. I think we need to get on board with the policymakers and have that conversation. And Gary, when you were talking about slowing down, Nancy will tell you that in order of things that I love, it's my kids, policy and the curriculum, and my cats. So my kids, and then my husband. He just
where's Jeff? Where's Jeff?
Oh yeah, and Jeff.
He don't make the kids. I mean, he's part of that. So, but the slowing down and this idea that we don't have to be 100 miles a minute all the time. So my girls are home with me. They're doing remote learning. And on Mondays, they do a little bit of learning, and they do a whole lot of community service. They go with my mom to do Meals on Wheels. They volunteer at a soup kitchen, and they take music lessons, and they might do an hour of actual school. Right. And and they're happy, and I'm happy, and it's working. So I love the idea of slowing down. It's been a good, just calming thing to happen in our family. So again, these things that we're able to realize now during the pandemic, I hope it's things that don't go away later on.
No, I agree with you on that. And Dr. Carey, just really quickly, I did want to say that one of the people that's a founder was asking if you knew somebody. So I'm going to bring up their question and everything, if I can find that particular remark. But they were asking if you knew a particular person and all of that. So I'm trying to find that particular quote and everything. So they were asking that within the chat if you knew a particular person. But I will tell you really quickly that one of the things that they always talk about, and that is our founder, or one of the founders, Kim Calhoun, she's also a policy wonk as well. So she's oftentimes bringing up policy all the time in the course of our conversations, whether it's around media, whether it's what's going on here with this network, or a number of other things. She's actually been involved in a number of things around abuse of women and things of that nature. And she's a big proponent of us having conversations around policy. So she is definitely a big fan of those policy discussions. So I definitely know that she is a longtime supporter of these conversations around policy. So just wanted to let you know you do have a fellow policy wonk that is out there and everything of that nature. So there are some folks in there that are all about policy and all of that. So just wanted to share that with you. And while I'm trying to get the computer to cooperate with the comments and everything, and hopefully bring up that comment of who she was asking about. So if y'all hold on and keep the conversation going, I'll try to find that particular quote from our.
Sounds like we
there
need
we go. I think I found it.
Oh,
that's not that. Here we go. She was asking about whether somebody knew.
Does Rowena McNulty know Carlene McNulty? Rowena McNulty, are you still watching?
Rowena said not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. She just text. Not yet.
No, I can see the comments on this side.
Oh. I see where the comments are. Oh, how cool.
She's like, oh, now I see it.
Well, there's a whole comment section over there and everything. But yes, and there were some great comments that were coming around. And now that I've got a better access, because, computers are wonderful. And somebody was trying to sell me one of those Norton virus kind of things. So it was blocking a part of what was going on. But I finally got rid of that so we could have some of these other conversations that were going on and everything. So Tanya Bosco was saying, the connection I'm hearing is the focus you all share on seeing possibilities, focusing on what we've gained as opposed to what we've lost, and how much school matters. And that this is such an important conversation. So I would agree with that comment, that this is a great and important conversation. And then Kimberly Jeter was adding a comment as well, which is that, yes, teach students how to think mathematically through real world problem solving with building their perseverance, whether you are teaching about content or not. Ignite the flame, give them a voice. So we definitely need to have folks that are giving them a voice and all of that. So definitely that was some of the comments that we were hearing, and I would agree with everything that was said in those regards. So definitely I'll go there, but definitely I'm sure that folks are watching from throughout, and who knows what other folks may comment and all of that. So Nancy, I'm turning it back over to you.
Well, I want to thank our 4:00 guests, Gary and Carrie and Keith, for joining us. Like I said, we could probably go on all night, but I have other guests to bring in. But thank you so much for joining me and for your insights and for everything you're doing in the world of education to bring about change. So
thank you. Thanks for having us.
God bless you guys.
Thank you. Good evening.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Definitely.
And,
Well, we're getting in some of our new people. I think that we've got Joanne and Penelope, and you'll have to tell me about their background and everything, because that's some of the new folks. And then we've got Tansy. But Tansy's apparently got something going on with the camera, so I've got to get her probably to pop back out and pop back in, and hopefully that will get the camera working and everything, because I'm not seeing her lovely face, Tansy, and everything. But we've got these folks. So Penelope, tell us a little bit about who you are, or Nancy can tell me who you are and everything, and definitely the same with Joanne.
Well, I just want to give a little overview, and then Penelope can talk more about who she is. And Joanne, it's great to see you again. But Adele, and I mean, think about this. If you were an assistant superintendent of a school district, it's a lot of work and it's a lot of craziness, and you need all the friends you can get. And then at some point you move on, you retire from that job and you go into some other fun things, but you still want to get together with your former friend, right? Like you want to still get together. So these three fabulous and fascinating women, as you will soon learn about over the course of our next 45 minutes together, are part of a group called The Formers. And there are, Adele, give us a little background. I think there are 7 of you all together.
There are 7 of us who have come together in different ways, who have all been former assistant superintendents in New Jersey. Several of our colleagues have been assistant commissioners at the state level, and Penelope could talk more about that as well. And over the last, I guess it's 6 to 7 years, we've been meeting regularly. Not necessarily monthly, but practically now monthly for a long time. And we often say we should be taping our conversations. We solve all the problems of the educational world. We think we have some strong opinions. We think we bring some knowledge and some wisdom and some insight. And we also recognize that we were really fortunate to have met each other at different parts of our careers, we might have come together at certain parts, have spread apart, not always had contact with each other, but kind of gravitated back into this group. And we recognize that some of our newer colleagues in our same positions may not have the benefit of such wisdom and knowledge that colleagues could count on. If we had a problem or needed some, collaboration or connectivity, we would call one another, or we served on state committees together. So this group's been kind of germinating. Joanne, again, has come to us most recently, but she's the best addition. She brings us all together. She's kind of the thread. We've done some writing and we've done some presenting. And so this is a small contingent of our group called the Formers.
And you are being recorded, so this is your opportunity to show that wisdom. All right, Penelope, give us a background.
Well, as you know, that's not easy for me to do because I've been working for 52 years. So to truncate it, but I always start by saying that my teaching discipline is French and Spanish language and culture. And then I have worked in higher education as being one of the first EOF directors in our state at Georgian Court College, where I joined the Sisters of Mercy, who ran that college. But some of the I guess more signature work was the development of the demonstration high school on the campus of Rutgers University in the 70s called the Gibbon School. And it had many of the features of a charter school. It was a small learning community that was to be a demonstration model for Rutgers University following the civil disturbances that had happened in the city of New Brunswick. And then about 15 years later, I created another new high school in the city of New Brunswick, which is the Health Sciences and Technology High School, where students' curriculum is articulated with their service work with Robert Wood Johnson Barnabas Hospital. And that is the only high school of its type in the state of New Jersey, on the campus of a teaching hospital where the curriculum brings students in direct contact with healthcare providers of all levels. I was assistant commissioner and
you did that little gig too.
Yeah.
Just a little small gig that she did, but she's done a lot of work and done some tremendous things. I'm definitely interested in learning more about her as well as learning about Joanne. And by the way, we have a little bit of a surprise that I was not expecting either, but one of the founders, Miss Kim Calhoun of the International Broadcast Media Network, wanted to say hello to you, Nancy. I've been pumping you up, talking about how great you are in putting together our second online dinner party featuring educators. And Kimberly is actually out of the world of education as well. She actually is on one of the boards of North Carolina State University, I believe the board of engineering, if I remember correctly. And she is also involved in a number of other things in the education field, but she is one of the co-founders of this lovely platform, the International Broadcast Media. So I just wanted her to at least be able to say hello to y'all because she has been thoroughly impressed with this conversation for the second time, and she is a big-time proponent of education. So, Kimberly, I know you wanted to say hello to Nancy and to some of these educators, so I'm letting you have the floor for at least a minute.
Well, thank you, Mark. And I am so honored to be in this room. Like, these are some very big influencers in our community. And thank you for allowing me to join. You ladies are not just a voice for the community. You're a voice for women. You're a voice for minorities, for people of color, for people who struggle. And I just want to thank you for your efforts.
Well, thank you for the platform.
I just want to listen. So, Mark knows I love to do this. I actually want to sit in this room and listen.
Well, you can just join in anytime. And I appreciate that you have the platform and that I stumbled upon Mark as a result of being on Sree's show and that he's allowed me to, bring all my friends to engage in some great conversations.
Oh, isn't Mark great? Like, so he's the Batman. You know how you got to have your superheroes, and he just comes in. I'll go, Mark, I need help. He never runs out of good conversation. He's so diverse, so wonderful. He is got this big heart. Mark, you're here, but he's got this big heart for the world. And to have somebody in our IBM TV family, and you guys being a part of this, is just heartwarming. And each and every one of you, your voices are being heard, and you might not know this, it's being heard around the world. And that's one of the things I've always dreamed of my whole life, was to be able to communicate around the world. So keep talking. I'm going to sit back.
Let you sit back and talk, and we'll get back to Nancy and everything. But just to let you know really quickly, and if you pop in at the end of this thing at 7 o'clock, but I do know for a fact that me and Nancy have been having a conversation about bringing this whole format of the online dinner party, but as an education thing, to this platform on a regular and consistent basis, whether that's on my show or whether that's a spinoff show. But I do know that Nancy has been very much interested in that conversation, having with you and Nick and others as well. So I do know that that's something that she is interested in doing, and I think that that's something that definitely Kim might be open to as well. So I'm putting both of y'all on notice that I know that both of y'all are interested, and that the whole topic of education is an important one. So I think that Kim is open to us spinning off an education show at some point or another. So just letting you know that, Nancy.
We are about the 17 SDGs, about bringing awareness. We're also a platform that's very rare and unique. We're allowing people with awesome quality content, whether they're minorities, disabled, or just regular people. We're giving them that opportunity to have distribution, which is very, very rare. I mean, I worked in the world of PBS. We were launching our TV show on CBS, and I decided, you know what? I'm tired of the way they work, the way they treat people. And no offense, some of them were pretty nice, but I wanted a different voice. I wanted a smarter, more resonated, real voice, not the ones that are paid for by ads. And I don't know if you noticed this, but during COVID, there was a lot of what you would call misinformation. I receive a lot of white papers and a lot of documents. I'm a scientist as well. And I was reviewing a lot of stuff when COVID was coming down the loop. And I go, why aren't these anchor people asking X, Y, and Z? And I go, oh, wait a minute. They have gag orders. Because sometimes when you walk in a room, I know this from being in media, you walk into a room, you're told what you can and cannot say. And if you can't adhere to that, you're out. So they were asking to me some very repetitives, and they weren't getting down to the problems. So I'm like, I went to my partner and I said, let's change this. Let's start a network. This was in the beginning of COVID. Instead of waiting to do it, let's start it now and try to get the people's voices out there. But I wanted to do more than just COVID, right? I wanted to do education because that's my heart. We do financial literacy to close that gap between poverty and sustainability. And a lot of people don't understand why that exists. And, Penelope, I think you do because of the work that you've been doing, especially up in New Jersey. So, that gap exists not just for the failure of access to literacy, but access to broadband. Yeah. Okay. And, and Marc hears me talk about this on other TV shows because I get on my soapbox. And because my problem is that the top 1% controls those policies. And we could have had broadband distributed to the rural areas, to the poverty sections of every community. But they chose not to do that. So, and I know this because of my engineering background, and that's why I sit on 2 university boards, not 1, but 2. So, and that's because I want to change it. But enough about me. You guys are wonderful. I'm going to sit back. You know what? I'm unfortunately, I'm not dressed. I am so sorry. I apologize because I'm usually dress code, but I just finished my physical therapy, my other therapy. And I'm
good one.
To women. And did you guys know Did you guys know that all the countries where women run the country, they are not suffering from the high COVID mortality rates and high COVID infected rates? Did you know this?
I did not know that.
No, I didn't know that.
So I report on it every day.
Yep.
That's pretty cool.
We have a daily news show every day, more about now we're changing it. We talk about it a little bit, but now it's more about innovation, sustainability, and we also promote a lot of conferences that are out there. So people, while you're locked down, get out and visit these conferences. We're getting free codes for people to go to these conferences. So feel free, 10 a.m. in the morning, Eastern Standard Time. We are here for you. But if you guys want to come join the show, let Marc know. I'll let you in. Marc's my Batman. So, but the whole idea is we need to unite.
Yeah. No doubt about that, and I appreciate you joining us and everything, Kim. I do want you to have that opportunity to talk to the teachers and everything, but I'll turn it back over to Nancy and everything. Sorry for that brief interruption, but when the boss calls in, you got to do what you got to do.
It was great to meet Kim. Thank you. So, Joanne, before we launch into our conversation, give us your highlights. And I'm not talking hair.
Although I do have them now.
I see those.
You see that? So I almost didn't become a teacher. I was heading toward being an accountant. And I was listening to Marc speak earlier about you never know where your teachers are going to come from. Yeah. And probably my greatest teacher was my dad, who saw something in me I didn't see myself, encouraged me to go into teaching. Sadly, he died my freshman year in college, so he never got to see sort of the results of his coaching. But I will tell you that the minute I put a toe in a classroom, I knew I was in the right place. And so 43 years later, I always look back and say, what a wild and wonderful ride. I look forward to going to work just about every day. I taught, I was a unit leader, staff developer. Nancy, I think that's when I met you. And way back when, principal, assistant superintendent. I continue to consult and do training today. And, teaching is part of my DNA. It's part of my blood now. And so it's been wonderful.
Awesome.
It's been wonderful.
Well, thanks.
And I appreciated listening to the dinner party conversation. I felt like I was at the kids' table. Like in the other room, I could hear the conversation, and I wanted to say something or say, "Oh yes."
Well, some of these people know some of those people, and it really would have been a dinner party.
Joanne, now we brought you into the adult room.
Yeah, into the adult room. And Joanne, it's interesting that you mentioned that because, as I was saying at the beginning of the show, I went to a smaller, more intimate Thanksgiving dinner with my mom, my two nephews, and my brother. So it's the five of us together and everything. So my two nephews, myself, my brother, and my mom. So yeah, that's five of us all together. But yeah, I remember the old days when I had my cousins and everybody else. And yes, we did have that adult table and the kids table. So after you got to be those teenage years, you moved up to the adult table. So you could hang out with the big folks and everything. So I definitely remember that concept that you're talking about and you ever noticed that kids table was much smaller? So you always feel it. You were also in a smaller confine as well because it was a smaller table that you were at.
Very true.
Exactly. And you were also at the kids' table if you were unmarried. So you could be 30 at the kids' table.
It's been a lot of time there, yes.
I used to say to my mother, can I just get to the adult table? Anyway, so let's talk more about instructional equity. So I'm thinking I would like to hear of your early days because the question is, have we gotten any better at equity?
Well, I'll just start because this will lead to Penelope, I think a little bit, probably to Adele as well. But I can remember one of the things Penelope said to me as I was approaching retirement, and that was that she stopped and asked herself at that point in time, was there something I missed? Was there something I missed? And that question stuck in my head And I allowed myself, you rarely have time to really just simply sit. We were talking about that earlier, just the ability to sit, reflect, talk. And when I asked myself that question honestly, I felt like the questions, the debates, what to do regarding equity was on the table way back when. And I felt like as I was leaving the field of public education, it still was there. I felt like we nudged it. I felt we pushed it a little bit. We got a little movement going, the dial moved. But I thought to myself, my gosh, despite trying to turn over every stone, I feel like it's still there. What did I miss? So Penelope, I credit you with pushing me that I don't have the answers, but it has certainly stirred my thinking and I think shaped the work that I've done since leaving education.
And I want to hear what Penelope's got to say as well about that and her whole comments and everything. But you just said that you retired and you look like you're about 30 or 35. So how did you manage to retire so early and everything of that nature? Because I'm still trying to figure out this whole retirement thing. And sometimes I'm going to be honest about the whole education thing. I do sometimes think that we retire our teachers too soon. And I do have some friends that are teachers, and I sometimes think that we retire them too soon because I'm of the opinion that folks can be effective teachers well into their 70s and 80s if they still have the quality. So I do sometimes think that we retire folks too early. So I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts on that as well. But I still can't believe that you're retired because you look like you're 35.
Wow.
I think she's 36.
That's true.
Well, thank you very much. I assure you that I am appropriately at the retirement age.
No, she's not. She's not retired. She's working harder than ever in lots of important ways. So don't listen to what she's saying.
I am actively engaged, and some of my family says that I'm the busiest retired person they know. But thank you very much. I will say on this question of equity, it certainly has been with us. The inequities have been with us too long, and they still are with us. I'm on a board, the George Street Playhouse board, and Adele is on that board with me. We're very proud members of this exemplary theater company in the state of New Jersey that has a worldwide reputation for the work that we do. And we have very boldly moved into examining how we contribute or don't contribute to equity with the work that we do. And one of the things that we did was the Education Programs Committee, which Adele chairs for us, read a recent report that was written in 2017, and it describes the segregation of the New Jersey public school system. I will tell you that as a youngster, the first school that I went to was in the city of Asbury Park, and my former friends know this story. And I walked through a door that said colored boys, colored girls in the 1950s. Then shortly thereafter, the Brown versus Board of Education national decision came down, and all schools in the continental United States were to desegregate. However, the state of New Jersey didn't fully do that until we came into the late 60s. New Jersey was one of the last states, and the towns of Englewood, Princeton, and Asbury Park were among the last to fully desegregate their schools. The evidence of this is shown in what school boards do as independent decision makers in our state. In other states, it would also be the governing body that's given to the rights to determine what's taught and tested, and also the funding of schools in public education. In New Jersey, we have over 600 separate school districts. Each school district has its own Board of Education. Each Board of Education is a separate governing group that determines how much money will be spent at all levels of education and within their community, and what materials will be used. As a youngster in sixth grade, I was very interested in and was quite a good, I might say. I have family members to attest to this. I was very interested in ballet. And I had a very, very fine ballet teacher in Asbury Park who prepared me for an audition with the School of American Ballet in New York City, which was the training school for New York City Ballet Company. This was in the late 50s. This is well before the integration of this art form at the professional level. But it was an eye-opener to me as a school student, because it was there that I met other young girls and boys whose school books were of a higher quality in terms of the rigor, and their lessons were of a different quality. And that prompted my parents to take that issue before the NAACP in Monmouth County in New Jersey. And that was an eye-opener, and I being the youngster that was the person of record in this situation, that had a lot to do with me thinking about a career in education as well as a career in the arts. So I'll just give you that background, because I think sometimes people think of these issues of being only of today or of being of so ancient a time period that you would not be talking to a person of my background who was a person who experienced that discrepancy, that inequality, and in terms of what the materials were that I was given. And the school districts were Asbury Park and Neptune school districts at the time. When we moved to a different community in the state, and where it was of a higher socioeconomic background, I was behind. And I know the feeling of being in the 8th grade and really struggling. But because of parental support and knowledge from, my parents, I was given the type of support that allowed me to make up for those deficiencies that, that came from having that separate and not equal early start.
And we had a commenter earlier make the comment that scenario seems to be even repeating now, sometimes within the racial confines, sometimes with other confines. Because actually, I've got some friends of mine that are going to do a event. I think it's with the American Association of the Arts, but they're going to be dealing with the LGBT community, and they're going to be doing some remote performances and things of that nature. So Charlotte Ammons, as well as a band called Lomeland, I believe is the name of the band, and some others are going to be doing a performance this month. But we are seeing these kind of issues happening both within the racial communities, within the sexual orientation communities, and within a number of other communities. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on some of the ways that we're trying to see repeats of this, but also how we're addressing it, Penelope. And by the way, I was going to let you know that I know a little bit about Asbury Park because I have a cousin that graduated from Duke University, and I'm actually living near Duke right now, but he graduated from that fine university. And then shortly afterward, he's lived before going into the military in Asbury Park. So I remember visiting him several years ago, and I have an aunt who unfortunately passed away of MS, but Carolyn Spurlock was actually a principal in Richmond, Virginia, as well as Sparta. So she was my direct aunt. She's my mother's sister. So she was actually engaged in that whole New Jersey education system for a number of years.
Mm-hmm. And so I don't want to make this, my single story.
Right.
As you hear that story, I want you to think about how many other learners were in the schools that I was attending and how many others were in the same classroom. So for today, yes, those issues are still prevalent. And that's why it is both a challenge and an excitement to be an educator, because you every day have the opportunity to make a difference. You have the opportunity to make a pathway for not a single student's success, but for the success of the entire family and for that school community and for the community at large. The look-fors today are indeed, first of all, the quality of content knowledge of each teacher. Whatever it is that teacher is teaching, what is so very important is they must know their content well so that they can diversify their delivery of instruction. So they know it well enough to not have just one style, one methodology, because you have learners with different learning styles, and you have the opportunity, when you know your content well, to inspire youngsters to want to learn the toughest content. So the classroom teacher is really the point of inspiration for each youngster and for that family. And the classroom teacher defines education throughout the learner's history. The next is, what tools are we providing for those teachers? What's the quality of the classroom environment? How is it dressed for success? Is a phrase that I love to use. So what do you have in your hands beyond a single textbook? And do you have the appropriate materials if you are teaching in a specialty area? So for instance, science education, it is important that a science lesson really be a lesson of exploration, of inquiry, where students are encouraged to manipulate material and information. The same is true in my content area of world languages. It's so important to romance the learner into understanding of another language, another tongue. And the romance comes through the use of music and through the use of literature, through the use of costumes. And by costumes, I mean native dress that you bring in into the classroom. The whole idea of making their world larger is the value there. So dressing for success and how that is shared in the learning community within the school. That, to break down this concept of when I go into my classroom, I close the door and it's my world. No. Faculty members need to be listening to one another, sharing techniques, sharing celebrations, and informing one another of how they are making breakthroughs in pathways. When I was the principal of these two schools that I talked about, I was a teaching principal. And in my inspiration, when principals today say, we're too busy, we can't get into those classrooms. If you're not in the classroom, you have no way of really having an assessment of the connection between the design and the delivery. And if they're not connected, then you don't have magic, you don't have inspiration, you don't have true learning going on. So one of the advantages of teaching was that you knew your student body. And so you struggled the way other teachers struggled. I wasn't successful with every learner, but when I met that learner that I didn't have a connection with, I found out what teacher did have a connection with that student. And I found out how that teacher talked or what it was. And sometimes I would just ask a colleague to say, well, can you please talk to to student X, and see what the breakdown is. So this sharing, this community of learners begins with the community of the professionals. I can go on, but
no, you covered a lot of everything.
Joanne an opportunity because
that's why we learn more about Joanne and what Joanne's got going on and what some of the surprising things that she found even in the education system herself. So I'd love to hear that. And one of the questions I have for both her and Penelope is I'm a big lover of books. You'll see that I've got a bookshelf behind me. So I want to know what those books are behind you and if there's a particular book that I need to know about that's got an amazing book that I need to have on my bookshelf. I've got a couple of bookshelves, but I need to know if there's one in that collection of yours. So Joanne, tell us something that you've got going on that you've learned education-wise, and if you want to share some books with our listeners, I would love to know those books.
Well, interestingly, I come from the same neck of woods that Penelope comes from. So I'm an Asbury Park, Neptune girl. And that's where I grew up. That's where I continue to live today. So we come from, our roots are very similar, so we have lots of things that overlap for us. But we've also talked about what has been different for us as well. So I tell you that because I've shared with my friends, that I really, truly believed and held in my heart for all of these years that I sort of had this notion of being a very unbiased person who was able to look at things through the lens of equity. I believed that about myself. And one day I heard someone talk about the fact that until you are made to feel uncomfortable, you are not really going to be able to sort of have an open conversation about equity. And Nancy, I heard you mention earlier about how this is a time of disruption, but from disruption can come something good that perhaps can be a silver lining. I keep hoping that part of that disruption that we're in the midst of is beginning to make us uncomfortable, and that will take the time that this period affords us to sort of take a look inside. I read the book. You asked what's on my bookshelf, everything, but I happened to read.
I hope you have my books in there.
I'm sure I do. Somewhere, Nancy, are your books. I know. But I read Small Great Things by Jodi Picoult. And the book is part of a book group, but the book shook me to the core. It made me question myself, and I began to really felt that paradigm begin to shift within myself, and I knew that what needed to happen was to do that deep inside look. I was approaching the end of my career in South Brunswick. I was just getting ready to retire.
Joanne, let me just interrupt to say this because Adele will just be amazed. I was just given that book by a friend, a woman on our George Street Playhouse Education Committee. Noni Fallon just sent me that book, and I just started to read it about a week ago, and it's just amazing.
Yeah.
Small great things.
I'd love to talk with you about that sometime.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it for me was the disruptor. It for me put me in a very uncomfortable place, and it made me start to go deeper and begin to recognize that within each of us there lies some bias. The big deal here is trying to know what it is, be aware of it, and then do something about it. One of the last things I tried to do in South Brunswick was to open a conversation, because South Brunswick was a district that truly prided itself in doing so much work in the fields of equity. We had a million things going on. And I thought to myself, the one thing I don't think we've done is take a look inside. And so I was just beginning to take steps in that direction. And I recognized pretty quickly that it isn't something you can do easily. It isn't something you can do quickly. And it certainly wasn't something I could do on my way out the door. But I think if you ask me, if I were back in a district, I think probably one of the things I would be doing is trying to engage folks in the conversation, use this time to have the conversation and see if we couldn't go a little deeper into self and figure out if there isn't something internal that's getting in our way. That's what I would share with you.
Powerful.
Among the books around me, Mark, are all kinds of things from the frivolous and silly to lots and lots of books that I've used in my profession, and also a pretty healthy collection of children's books because I have a couple of little granddaughters, and so I also have those in the mix. I'll think a little bit if there's one particularly I'd recommend to you. You had mentioned earlier, Adele, you were talking about career preparation. Mm-hmm. And Mark, you were talking about the kinds of courses that are maybe losing some ground or disappearing or closing up, et cetera. One of the books among here somewhere on my shelf is called Shop Class is Soul Craft. And it's about losing our grip on some of those courses in which kids really had the hands-on experiential kinds of things. Shop class.
No, shop class is very important, and I agree that sometimes that's one of the things I felt we have lost. And I've had some friends that are vocational fields. I actually have an uncle that was a plumber before he retired, and a number of folks that are like auto mechanics and a number of other things. And while I love teachers, and I definitely agree with some folks, including Shondell Rhimes, that said that y'all need to get paid a lot more than y'all get paid, I also would say that a lot of those courses that we've lost, like the plumber, the washing machine mechanic, because actually I just had my washing machine in my apartment repaired recently and everything, and a number of other things. Those folks get paid pretty well. So in some cases paid even better than the doctors, and we're not even training them in those fields. So in a lot of school systems. So we're actually losing some of these kind of fields that you're talking about, and they actually have some good aspect of our society, and they're also oftentimes paid some pretty good coins. So we're losing that in our school system, I feel, and that's something that is a shame. And by the way, one of our listeners was saying the power of collective learning, and I would definitely agree with that. That is something that's very important. And they were also talking about that financial gap, because Mr. Bailey came back on and said there is a financial gap as well as an opportunity gap. We must work with community partners to build an infrastructure that gives access to all. And I'm definitely a big fan of that. And I know that there's a lot of folks here in this community of North Carolina and the Triangle area that are big fans of that, but throughout the country and throughout the world. And then somebody said that they were reading Cultivating Genius by Goldie Muhammad. And I don't know if this other person has a book, but let me bring up what their remark was. Perfect, Joanne, so inspirational, and Shanae can help us and is proficient in this lens. So definitely they were saying that as well.
So as we begin to wrap up our 5 o'clock hour, I would like to end with a question that I'd like you to all weigh in on. I'm going to start with you, Shanae, and go around the table. Yes, like if you think now about what's going on in schools, remote and hybrid learning, what one piece of advice would you give to educators to achieve greater equity in this situation? Steps we can take today. Y'all can be thinking.
Yeah.
Shanae's on the spot first.
For sure. I think the infrastructure that Keith mentioned that is a piece of it, and that's bigger than obviously what we can all tackle within our classroom space. But definitely reaching out and seeing all of your students is of critical importance. And because I wrote down, because what Carrie talked about earlier, I think is important, because not having the luxury of having your kids at home to be able for them to do these extracurriculars as well, but also thinking about the kids who they don't have that privilege and luxury to do that. How are we making sure that they're getting reached and having that same full level of, someone caring for them and having them be in these different things as well? How can we bring those experiences to all of our students that may not have, that parent who's there at home with them to have them do these other pieces, or, grandparents or whatever have you, but how are we making sure that we're feeding our students these experiences through how we're, instructing them? How are we making sure that they have access to these experiences or opportunities to know and engage in these things that are authentic, and making connections with them? Or to Penelope's point earlier, it's not me that I'm making that connection. I'm finding someone who is. So that way, no student is feeling that they can just be absent and nobody cares, because that is, have to make sure that is our priority. If it's not me that's going to reach you, I'm going to go down the hall and find a teacher that is, because I want to make sure that every kid is here, because you're all important. I respect your time, and I want to make sure that I'm providing you with rigorous, engaging instruction. But it starts with that one-on-one.
I guess we're going around the horn, so it's all you, Adele. So, Adele, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was just jotting down some things. I think if we could shift, to tell an educator at all levels, if we could shift from the idea of teaching to learning, what does that really mean? That would shift the focus a lot. And then if we're going to have it focused, as we all talked about tonight, on the learners, school will never be enough. So what other kinds of things does the opportunity of this digital format allow us to bring in? How do we bring in the arts? How do we bring in authentic problem solving? How do we make it so interesting for students that they want to sign onto their computers earlier, even if they don't all have access to a computer? How are they fighting over those computers to get to either that teacher as the facilitator or that excitement that's going to occur with those interactions with the other students in a set time, or as Gary said, maybe not in a set time, maybe in small groups? So I guess what I would say to educators is we need to push the envelope. We need to stretch it. We need to think beyond right now. We need to take some risks. We need to try to hypothesize and envision what we would think of as an ideal educational world, and try to provide that for our students tomorrow, and not wait for some policy or administrator to say it's okay. I mean, you're facing those kids every day on that screen. How are you impacting their lives? So again, I think equity at a really base level is affecting everybody, because students with different language connections, students with different, ethnic backgrounds, but what are you doing to make a difference in those kids' lives? So.
No, sounds like some great comments. I can't wait to hear Joanne's, by the way. And by the way, Adele, I've decided I want your artwork that's behind you and everything, because it looks like some great artwork that's behind you. So
I move around a lot. And Nancy, my background is sometimes my kitchen. So tonight you've got like the formal kind of better lighting background. Thanks, Mark.
Very serene, Adele. Very serene.
Thank you.
Just a few things. I think, Nancy, in the very beginning, you talked about how you're working with teachers, and you're talking about one way to teach. Just find that one way to teach, and the way, that really great way to teach, whether it's remote, whether it's hybrid, whether it's in person, it is what it is. And I know when in some of the training that I do, I talk about the fact that good teaching is good teaching is good teaching, regardless of where your students happen to sit. Good teaching is good teaching. I've started to think about equity in different ways, another lens you need to put on is what I'm doing equitable for the kids who sit at home, for the kids who sit in front of me, for the kids who are with me for part of the time, then off the computer for part of the time, and back. When I sit back and look at my day or my week holistically, do I feel that I've dealt with each of those groups equitably? It's a little different twist on it. And I think those would probably be the biggest things. The final thing I would say is we have a very unique opportunity because folks are able to record themselves as they teach. And, I often think to myself, my gosh, there's lessons that I've taught, there's workshops that I've done. They came and they went, and there was nothing that preserved it. Adele, you were talking about we don't have the opportunity to tape ourselves very often. But there are opportunities. I go back and look at my trainings now to see what I did that I think was particularly effective, what I could do differently next time around. It's a great opportunity. There's another little silver lining.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Before we get to Penelope, I would agree with what you just said, Joanne, and just to share with you all and everything, I think that it's something that impacts everything and not just the school system. I know that I've got a number of friends that as I'm getting older and I'm now in my late 50s, they have passed on, but some of them had some tremendous things that they were doing in society. One of the gentlemen was in New York and he was involved in the theater community, like you, Adele. So Garland Thompson was involved in the theater community and did a lot of plays. He created some plays and did some other things. There was another gentleman, Jim Fields, that did a lot of video taping of newsmakers and things of that nature. But unfortunately, the families then got those properties and things of that nature. And as far as I know, they are sitting in closets, they're sitting in other places, and they're not necessarily out in the community being shared. So even though they were created, they weren't being shared. And I think that that's also what happens with teachers. So I think a lot of times those great lectures that the teachers might have done, if they would be recorded, then they could be shared in perpetuity and everything, because there could even be some contextual things that can happen in that sense. Because, what's happening in the this year in 2020 is definitely going to be one for the century. So the people that are in 2120, hopefully they'll have access to this video that we're doing right now, and they can think about what was happening in 2020 with the pandemic, with education and everything along those lines. But I feel that too often we don't do enough of that. We don't do enough of the documenting, both in the education context as well as in other contexts as well. So I think that's something that we as a people need to work on more in detail. But Penelope, I'll let you have your thoughts as well.
Thank you. Well, I certainly agree with everything that Shanae, Adele, and Joanne have said. So I'm going to, I immediately started to think, though, about the affective domain. I started to think about the feelings inside. And to stay, so my concern for today's educators, and by the way, I'm very proud of the fact, I'm going to give them a shout out. Joanne and Adele know this, that we have 5 new teachers in my family. So for some people, the trade is law or medicine. For the Latimers, it seems to be educators. So we have Whitney and Sean and Lindsay and Ebony and Margot are all teachers in our family. I'm very proud of them.
Congratulations! Wonderful.
Yeah. When I think of what if I were in the classroom, what did I draw on? To remember when I struggled as a learner, and to remember how I was treated by the teachers who uplifted me and made it possible for me to be a successful learner. So to hold on to that compassion as I am, drilling in content, also to be compassionate, to be curious about my youngsters, who they are and who their parents are, and to go into their lifestyle. So that means showing up in the community, going to their events, and walking the streets where they live, and whether it's a shishi street or whether it's, a back alley. Be present and let them see you being present so that they understand that the classroom for you is the totality, and share with them, the things that you find exciting. Youngsters are very curious about their teachers, so they love to know any little kernel about us personally. And that forms a connection and a trust, where then when you say, now I want you to do this work, there's trust that you really care about them. But never give up high expectations. See every learner as a capable learner, and give to that learner your best and continue to drill down within yourself. How can I better teach this? How can I better explain this? How can I love to use this word? How can I romance this youngster and the family into caring about doing well in school in this particular subject and the next subject? And if you're the school principal or the leader of the district, then care about all of them and be curious about the whole family.
No, you definitely got to do that. There's no doubt about that. And by the way, you are right. It is a hereditary thing within the family. Like I said, my younger brother worked with the quote unquote troubled youth and things of that nature. So he's followed in the footsteps of my mom and my aunts and everybody that was involved in education. And one of the things that we learned at Thanksgiving, during Thanksgiving dinner and the whole conversation, was that one of my aunt's kids, or one of my aunt's grandkids, Sierra, is now, she'd already joined the teaching ranks, and now she's about to join the ranks of you here on the panel that are moms, because she is now an expected mom. So my aunt is about to be a great grandma. So she was already a grandma. Now she's about to be a great grandma. So she's excited about that. But it's definitely continuing that lineage of teachers and everything within the family, because Sierra Wiley had been involved in the whole teaching. I think she was teaching on one of the grade school levels, if I remember correctly.
Well, of course, that's the first teacher, the grandmother and the mothers.
Well, I want to thank the formers for rocking the 5 o'clock hour. Penelope and Joanne, thank you so much for being here. And Penelope, I don't know if you saw before, but Danita Ishibashi is coming to the next session. She's on the 6 o'clock hour, and she gave you a shout out from
Thank you.
So thank you for joining and sharing your insights to both of you.
No, thank
Definitely.
Thank you.
Great conversation. I'm going to bring the other audience folks in and everything, but we did have some comments. Lauren Francescan said, absolutely, the focus of schools should always lie about student learning, and was thanking Adele for some of the comments that were made by Adele and everything. And then Tanya Bosco said that shift of talking about teaching to focusing on learning makes all the difference, Adele, and that they totally agree with everything that was being said in that regards. And then Tanya Bosco said, Joanne, that level of self-reflection is a silver lining indeed, and the time and opportunity to do it matters. So those were some of the comments that were coming on and everything. And we also had one about Penelope, which is, that's awesome, Penelope. The level of empathy makes all the difference. Compassionate leaders with high expectations engender that thinking to others. And I would definitely agree that we need to have that kind of compassionate leadership. And Nancy, I'm so glad that you've introduced me to these folks over the last 2 times of us doing this particular version of the online dinner party, because I do believe that teachers are some of the most impassioned people out there. And that's both the teachers in the classroom as well as what I call the teachers of society, which is what I consider myself to be, one of those teachers within society. So definitely I think that teachers are a vital part of what goes on in the world. But I'm going to bring in some of the folks.
All right. Bye, Penelope. Bye, Joanne.
I'm going to do a blatant plug. The other 4 formers and us would be thrilled to do a former segment with Nancy and you. So
trying to bring her into the stream and everything. So
now Marc's got to work.
That did not quite work. There we go. There's
boop, boop,
yep.
boop, boop.
There's Tansy. And about to bring in Amelia as well. There's Amelia.
Wait for a minute.
Yeah, Tansy, Amelia, is Danita back there?
Let's see if I see Danita. I thought that I saw everybody that was back there. I know somebody was in with just audio stream. There is Danita. Let's see if I can bring Danita in. She may be audio stream as well, but we'll see.
All right.
Danita.
And leave Adele, obviously.
I'm here. Somebody rang my doorbell. Sorry.
It's loud. And Penelope, I guess, can go backstage.
Yes.
No problem. We can do that. Hopefully, Danita will get her camera up and everything, but I'll get ready to take Penelope back to the backstage area and everything so she can watch the conversation from back there and everything. So definitely that's what's going on. And hopefully, Danita will get the camera working. Otherwise, we might have to. There we go.
A little bit. There she comes. Okay.
Yeah. Finally.
All right, so we have had a fabulous 4 o'clock hour, a fabulous 5 o'clock hour, and now we have the what do you call the people who the sweepers who
The home stretch.
So I will say that I met Tansy Kilcrease, who is and Tansy, make sure I get your title right, Assistant Superintendent.
Yes, that's it.
For Bibb County Schools in Macon, Georgia. I should say that with a little accent, right? Georgia. Yeah. And Nancy and I met at a conference talking about the work we do in professional development. And then we were at a virtual happy hour together where we just, blew the roof off that place. So I knew she was my soul sister and, quite a fun-spirited person. So I had to have her here. And then Amelia Larson, I fell in love with how many years ago, Amelia? Amelia was 6 years? 6, 7. Amelia was the assistant superintendent. Do I have it right? Assistant super, because sometimes it's assistant superintendent in Pasco County, and she brought us into Pasco County to start working in some of the schools, design student-centered classrooms, etc. Unfortunately, she didn't stick around that long to play with me, so she went to the American Reading Company and is now the Executive Vice President of Innovation and
Academic Partnerships.
So, love hanging out with Amelia. Sometimes we meet in New York City. And then I met Danita Ishibashi. We keep trying to figure that out. We went back years ago someplace that we met, and actually Danita and Shanae just spoke at New Jersey School Board's conference on equity together to a crowd of hundreds. So it was a good session. But Danita is my newer friend of the group here. And likewise, just, I have a soul connection with all three of you. So excited to have you here for this final hour. And I would like to introduce you to the amazing host, Marc Lee. Take it away, Marc.
Hey, Marc. Hey, how's it going, Amelia? One of the things I was curious about as I was seeing about things that folks were involved in, and we kind of touched on it earlier and everything, but that's the whole concept of innovation. So, Amelia, I'm going to turn it on to you and everything. Could you talk about the importance of innovation to our classrooms and everything? A lot of folks are finding new ways to be innovative with what's all going on in the pandemic and everything, but sometimes we're also feeling that we're not doing as much as we should be doing innovation-wise. So it seems like you're involved in innovation in education. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on what we're doing right and what we can do better, because I do know that even here on this network, we've got a number of shows that are about innovation. So innovation is a very important part of what we talk about on a regular basis. So I know that there's some of our leadership that's watching both here and in other parts of the world that are in the innovation field. So I'd love to hear your thoughts as to what we're doing, either right or not right, in the field of education and with innovation.
So I think it's really important to innovate for the sake of problem solving. So you have to understand what you're trying to solve before you start innovating. So when I brought Nancy into my schools in Pasco County, what I was trying to solve is flip the classroom so the kid was more in charge of their own learning. So I didn't go after Nancy because she's awesome. I went after Nancy because she solved the problem. I wanted my kids to become more independent, more agentive, right? So I wanted the classroom to foster, support identity, intellectualism, criticality. And to start that, I needed to start with independent learning. So I think that's sometimes where we go wrong. We go wrong because we're not sure about what we're trying to solve. So I think that's the most important thing. And now, in terms of innovation, we live in a time that I think the movement of Black Lives Matter have really called us to question our practices, our beliefs, our stances, and make some changes. So innovation to me right now is all about justice. It's not even equity. Mm-hmm. I think equity is out. It's about justice. So when I hear people throw around innovation, I want to hear something that takes me to their understanding of justice and true access that will advance opportunities for all kids.
No, I definitely agree with you on that, and I'm going to do a little mic adjustment here and everything. But I would love to hear what Tansy's got to say about that as well, because I also would agree with you that innovation and justice have become very much interlinked. And we actually have a gentleman who lives here in North Carolina who is involved in technology and entrepreneurship, and I would argue education, who's one of our new members of our family, who's originally, I think, from West Virginia, but he also has some family roots to India. But I do think that there is connection between justice and between education. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, Tansy, and then I'll come to Danita as well.
Well, wait, Tansy, before you start, I got to give Tansy a shout out, and you're going to have to help me with the title. But Tansy is just listed as one of 2 finalists for AASA's, that's American Association of School Administrators, Educator of the Year at the district level. Right?
That's amazing.
Women in School Leadership Award. So
yeah. Even better.
Yes.
We're rooting for you. We're rooting for you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate
You're the best in my book. So.
Oh, you're so sweet. You're so sweet. Well, I also wholeheartedly agree with Amelia. When we hear the word and the term innovation, people just start thinking, it's about creating something new. Mm-hmm. And so we all know that there's nothing new under the sun. That's what the Bible says. Mm-hmm. And I'm from the sun, so I can say the word Bible, can I? Nothing new under the sun. But it's so much more than just that. And I agree with you, Amelia. It's about justice. It's about solving, society's problems, but also society's capacity to act. And so I just believe that innovation in education, of course, is important. I had an opportunity to listen to the formers that were on earlier, but also to some of the speakers that you had on earlier. And, a lot of them talked about the fact that we've got to change things in education. We can't keep continuing to do things the same way. And so I wholeheartedly agree with Amelia and really and truly educating people on what truly is innovation in education. I don't think that we have a common understanding or a common definition of that.
Yeah. Danita, what are your thoughts on that as well? I'd love to hear what you've got to say about that. And I would love to hear even how we're incorporating innovation into the global community. Because like I said, the International Broadcast Media Network is a network that talks about education and other issues, not just here in the United States, but throughout the globe. So, and of course, innovation is something we're always hearing about on a global community. So I'd love to hear your thoughts as to how that's tied in to education and how we can make it even more connected.
Thank you. So, I agree with Tansy when she said that innovation in education is, not just about creating something new. And I think the place where we are right now in this pandemic has really caused us to think about and reflect what we are doing in education. What are we teaching students? And are we teaching them what is truly important that they need? Or are we teaching what is convenient and what we've always done? Right? Because now that we're living in this hybrid, virtual, or whatever the environment is, what is important and what is necessary has changed. So the innovation may be taking the time to actually stop and think and say, I know we've been doing this for 100 years and we all thought it was a good idea. Maybe it's not so much of a good idea. So maybe the innovation is this situation forcing everybody to think differently. Why are we teaching what we are teaching? Is it because it's always done that way? Or is it because it is truly meaningful and required that a student has that foundational knowledge so they can move to the next level? And so when I think about education and I think about innovation, and not creating things where people want to move directly to technology, we're all living with technology. I don't know if it's actually improved the instruction, but in the hands of somebody who has the mindset that they are going to focus on what learning is important for students, then I do see an incredible learning curve that's happening that's phenomenal and powerful for students. So when I think about innovation, it's really about changing the mindset of people and taking that time to reflect on what truly is important about teaching and learning for all students.
Definitely would agree with you on that and everything. And I do sometimes think that we don't do enough of that. And sometimes we do depend too much, Danita, on the equipment and the technology end of innovation and all of that. And I know that that's something that we need. And sometimes I don't know that we have enough access to it. And I know we talked about that in the earlier part of this conversation, but that's some of the other aspect of what goes on is how we can give people access to the innovation. So I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts on ways that folks can even have access to innovation if we're going to be talking about the innovation aspect of what's going on. So I guess I'll go right to left my way. So Tansy, I'm coming back to you.
So say that again.
Access, how folks can have access to the innovations.
Well, I believe that the collaboration that I've seen going on since COVID has been remarkable. And the fact that, even when we first started this back in March, I was fortunate enough to work with Harvard and PELP, the PELP program, and really talk to people across the nation and realize that, we're not in this alone. We're not creating this stuff on our own. We don't have to create it on our own. So I believe that creating that space and those opportunities for us as peers and colleagues and educators across the nation, across the globe, across the world, because we're really interdependent. We're not independent, but we're interdependent. I think that will increase the access to innovation because you can't think of it all on your own. I know that we were just stagnant at one point. We were just like, if I have to think of one more thing, if I have to create one more thing, or if I have to figure out something else, I just don't know if I would be able to do it. So, really and truly employing those 21st century skills of that collaboration is so important in order for us to be able to bring those creative ideas to others and to also provide that access to innovation to others.
Yeah, because one of the things that happened, and I'd love to hear Amelia's thoughts on this, that I remember I've got a good friend of mine that's an online educator. So she's actually in the college situation. So she's a college educator, but she actually felt that she had a better advantage to some of the things, even with innovation and access, because they were doing that at an early stage, even before the pandemic. So she felt that she was at an advantage because they were already doing that kind of stuff before it became a thing that was nationally known and everybody had to do. So she felt that she, because of having those kind of early ties, was ahead of the curve because of already having done that. I mean, in some cases, even involved in the creation of some of the programs in some of these online universities. So do you think that is true, Amelia, with some of the folks that might have been involved in online learning were ahead of the curve versus even some of our college professors and some of our folks that are teaching on the grade school level that weren't necessarily doing the innovations that they should have been doing, even though it was already out there at an early stage?
I think that's partially true. I think the learning curve when you are learning how to operate new systems and videotape yourself, there's a technical aspect of it that represents a barrier and people need a lot of supports. But what I think, like when I brought Nancy into my schools, it was not long distance. It was bricks and mortar, right? But the framework that she brings into it and the way it really helps kids be more in ownership of their own learning. It develops the dispositions, the executive functioning in order to pull it off. Then it's much easier for those schools to go online because the kids already have what they need in order to maintain that, right? If you are creating dependency even online, then it doesn't matter, right? So what I say about that is look for whether you are bricks and mortar, blended, or virtual, or long distance. I shouldn't say virtual. But look for what is already working in your context. Who is doing it right? And then go in and study your positive outliers because the answer is in the room. If we study our positive outliers and then we start to scale, right? We're going to learn about our structures. What do we need to adjust? What do we need? Because you don't want to roll something new and then outrun your coverage. You don't want to do that. So starting something small and creating this like When I brought Nancy into 2 schools, all of a sudden, all 46 wanted. But I said, no, you can't have it. You can't have it yet, right? So you have to start small and create the consensus and the infrastructure so implementation can be more successful.
And one of the things I was going to add to that and everything, and I'm going to come back to Danita and everything, is that sometimes I feel that we don't always encourage innovation even at the early age of youth and everything of that nature. I know that the last time we did one of these discussions and everything, I mentioned my father, and my father was actually teaching my nephews at a very young age. He was teaching them at like when they were like 1 or 2, showing them things around nature, showing them like what a plant was, what certain animals were, things of that nature. But he was doing that at a very young age. They were like, my brother had his kids late in life. So I think he was like maybe around 39 or 40 at the time that they were in their young ages, because he's 51 right now and everything. But I remember Dad doing that. And I feel that too often we're encouraged not to do that. And that to me, that is a form of innovation. And Dad has always been an innovative thinker. So he's always been one, whether it's teaching his own grandkids or neighborhood kids, that he's going to get them involved. And I think that even on a community level, we don't do enough of that. And I was wondering your thoughts on that, Danita, because I do think that we can incorporate innovation even on that local grassroots level, for lack of a better term.
You know, it's interesting. And now that we are in this kind of mixed world of being brick and mortar and being digital, one of the things that we are finding is that our students need connections to people.
Yeah.
Right. And they're missing that sorely. And so we are working and truly being innovative on how do we connect. So in that brick and mortar situation, you're always trying to find somebody to bring into your building. And right now, we're not bringing anybody into our buildings. And in fact, we don't have a whole lot of people in the building. So, you know, once you start to release this brick and mortar thinking about time and space, all of a sudden you can be innovative. So we are looking, and we have developed some mentoring programs that are virtual, and interaction with staff members, monitoring with our students. So, you know, there are people out there who want to give and are trying to find ways to connect. And we're just trying to be innovative and just thinking differently. Amelia talked about just problem solving. We're just trying to solve the problem in a different way and take advantage of the fact that we are living in this very different learning environment and space, and not seeing it as a negative, but trying to see the potential in it to do something that we had never envisioned before. And I think that's really the challenge right now, is people have to think differently. They don't want to think differently, but they are just confronted daily in their instruction that they can no longer continue to do what they were trying to do. It just doesn't work. They don't get the same results. So we have to be more innovative and let go some of our old notions, but also be open to those positive things that are out there if we reframe our idea about time and space. As we think about education and instruction. And we have to make it entertaining for our students. When our students are in school, they come to class because they have no choice.
That's right.
When they're online, it's real easy to turn off that camera or not even log in.
That's right.
So if you weren't exciting in the classroom and you didn't get more exciting online, you're not getting any more participation. And I've talked to teachers about that, and they now are rethinking what they are doing and why, because they don't like the fact that their students aren't connecting with them. So we just got to release our thinking and let the innovation sink in and not be so afraid of it. Because
do something.
Yeah, I wanted to bring up something, and you actually brought up a good question, Danita, and it's something that I ran into with a friend of mine that actually works at a nearby restaurant and everything. But she was talking about the fact that her son, who I think is 7 or 8, was not necessarily becoming engaged with the computer or engaged with the teachers, and she was getting frustrated with that. So for folks that are around the globe or even here in the United States that are teachers that are doing this online kind of community, what kind of ways would you suggest that they find to get their people engaged, whether it's the parent or whether it's the student? Because I can tell you that Lexi, who is this friend of mine that works at the restaurant, when I ran into her on the bus, she was quite frustrated because she was having a day off and she knew that there was going to be a challenge with her son trying to get him engaged. So I'd love to hear your thoughts as to ways that teachers can become engaged when they're dealing with this online kind of situation. And I'll start with you, Amelia, and then we'll go middle out. So I'll start with Amelia, then come to you, Tansy. But I do know that a lot of times folks are trying to figure out ways that they can become engaged in this situation. So I'd love to hear your thoughts, Amelia.
And Mark, Adele waved before, so at some point, drag her in.
I will drag Adele in.
I do think, like, as a foundation, your approach to teaching and learning is going to impact this, right? So if we are approaching from a problem-based perspective, which that's what I'm going to be talking about. I think the first question is not what standards or dispositions, it's what warrants the urgency of their learning and their thinking. What warrants the urgency? So, for example, if I'm doing an ecosystem unit, I'm going to launch that with a great video that is going to show the problems that we are faced with. And I'm going to say, how are you going to be a part of the solution and not a part of the problem, right? So that launch becomes critical, and then have choices. If we're going to study ecosystems together, then you give them choices on what ecosystems to study. Don't make everybody do the same thing, right? So having questions ongoing and having a real audience, inviting people in, but starting every day, do we have the right experience or targets that warrants the urgency of their thinking and their learning? Yeah. Skills are the low bar. I'm not kidding you. Like, skills are the low bar. If we are stopping them, we lost the battle. And include parents. Parents are in the classroom. So if you don't feed them, they will eat you. You gotta feed the parents or they're gonna eat the teachers. Seriously, like, we need to think about, how do I involve the parents in productive ways? And have them this long view that by the end of 6 weeks or 9 weeks, we're going to have a product that we're going to present to a real audience.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Adele, I think you had something you wanted to add, but I also had to put Tansy into the conversation as well. So I'll go to Tansy. I'll go to Tansy and then come to you. So Tansy?
Well, Mark, we have been amazed at how involved our parents have been. In fact, one day, the parent unmuted herself and said, "Now you're teaching today." So, I mean, they're with our kids, because we actually were a remote for the first 9 weeks. And all of our students were actually taught virtually. And what we realized is that we had parental involvement. And so we had them, and we were using our learning management system, which is Canvas. And so, making sure that they're involved in that check-in with their students, and just ensuring that they understand the process. And I don't think we've done a great job with that in the past. We just did school because that's what we did. But I think that we had to really reevaluate how we were involving our parents in the entire process. And so we've been very pleased with the parental involvement that we have had since COVID-19. But I will say that when we do assessments, that's when we don't want the parental involvement.
Yes.
And we've had some of that. And so we've had to really explain to the parents, when we do these assessments, we really want to know what the students know and what they don't know, so that we can provide and scaffold for them. So that it's been amazing. I think it's been a great opportunity for us to reevaluate our relationships with home. Cool.
Definitely.
I want to pop in after Adele too, but I'm going to let Adele go.
Let me get the Adele off of mute. But
to what you had asked. Yeah, I'm going to circle back to what you had asked about innovation and your example of your colleague or your friend who is teaching in an online university. I teach in a traditional principal certification program in an institution of higher ed, and I also oversee New Jersey's non-traditional principal certification program. And what I've realized over the last few months is that as we're talking about the teachers in the classrooms and innovation, we're talking about teachers who were all prepared, and administrators prior to the pandemic. that were trained in a certain way. My next new experimental group is for the group of teachers going through teacher preparation training right now during the pandemic, and also administrators going through their training as part of this pandemic experience. And I've been saying to people, it's affording you wonderful opportunities because there is no playbook here. But even for teachers coming out, student teachers, they now need to design lessons that are much more innovative or different for a hybrid situation that we ever trained teachers before. Administrators need to look at schools in a different environment in terms of what innovation looks like, but also what effectiveness looks like in terms of an online virtual world. So these last months in New Jersey, at least since March 13th, right, through now, it's really 9 months. But it takes 3 months usually, right, if you want to stop smoking, to change a practice, right, to change a habit. We've now changed habits of teacher preparation and principal preparation. They've been in internships for the last semester or 2 semesters. So it's going to be very interesting to see how much they push the envelope and do things, just expect things to be done differently once they now land in teaching positions, administrative positions, because that old thinking of how we were trained in the past is different and changed. So as we go forward, I think I want to say a professor in higher ed, I've taught online classes before the pandemic struck. The way I do my online classes now is totally different than what I did prior to the pandemic. Those students at the graduate level need more support and interaction and networking. Principals who are preparing to be principals need interaction with other colleagues. So it's going to be a mightily different world, I think, in the short term, given this experience that they're going through as training now for future educators and future administrators. So I think we're going to see some jumps and leaps and bounds, and not just vacant innovation, but really solid work that's connected to authentic learning. We'll see.
And Shanae, I know you've got some things that you wanted to add, but before you get to that, I do have another quick question, and you may even come to what you're going to add in terms of your insight and everything. But I do remember the last time we had this conversation, and I've also had it, like I said, I live near Duke University. There's been some talk that we might not even see the universities in the same way that we used to see them. Like I said, Duke's got this lovely buildings and all these buildings, and I've heard people even speculating that some of those buildings might wind up having other uses because we might not see as many students coming in because there might be smaller classrooms. So I was wondering your thoughts on that and whatever other remarks you were going to be making, Shanae, because I have heard people speculating that these universities, whether it's Duke, whether it's Harvard, whether it's Princeton, whether it's UCLA, that we might be seeing a new model of even the higher education.
For sure. There's two points I actually want to make connected to that. One is when Tansy was talking about the parents being in the classroom. Denise and I had a whole conversation about this as we were preparing for our presentation. But it's interesting because there's also a level of accountability for that, right? Because before it'd be like, yo, you had to sign up at the desk. If I know you when you come in the classroom, you spend a special time. This whole process when I was teaching, you're not just going to pop in this classroom. I need to know when you come in the door. But now it's like, you never know when they're at the door until they'd be like, ma'am, excuse me, we didn't get that part of the lesson. So this connection between home and school, which is important, and I think it opened eyes to Tansy's point. Parents are involved. They want to know what's going on. Yes, we don't need y'all sitting at the assessment table, but there wasn't a level before where you wouldn't have seen parents come into parent conferences. I think because it's also at an inopportune time, like what parent can really just take off the day from 1:15 to 2 o'clock to come to a parent conference, because that's when I have my planning period. But that's a whole nother issue. But now that to Danita's point, time and space that's no longer the issue. Now you can conference with parents like at any moment. They listening in on the class. How was my kid participating? So I think they were always involved. But what parenting looks like with like in teaching now is different. And I think that we had to also train parents, because if you're just helping with homework, that's different than now I have to set up an environment for my kid to learn school. That's different.
So that's where I created the elements of home-based learning and did the webinars for parents, because I had to keep saying to them, you are not homeschooling your children. There is still a school. They're delivering the curriculum. You have teachers. you are not homeschooling, but you should manage a home-based learning environment. And here are the elements that you can, use in order to do that. So.
Yeah. And then my second point is I'm in my doctoral program, and my professor, Dr. Denton, she did her dissertation around distance learning like late 90s, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm doing it in instructional design. And what I found in doing my research and readings is that typically in courses that are built online, you have an instructional designer that has crafted this particular course.
Right.
Now we've asked teachers to be teachers and instructional designers to craft online instruction without really thinking about there's intentional instructional design and learning theory that goes behind when you have different courses being created. But now we're asking teachers to be both. I need you to not only design the course, you also going to be out here teaching it, grading it, assessing it, and passing it on to the next. And so I think that is a shift we have to think about too, that teachers are now not just teaching, but you're also having to be the instructional designer, not just of a lesson, but now how is this going to translate remotely? And that's a whole different skill set and things to think about. That I'm always been now pondering as I'm working with teachers, thinking about, yes, you need to think about yourself as a designer of what this is going to look like in my Canvas shell, Google Classroom, Schoology, whatever your shell is, but also making sure my content comes across in the same way. And so there's different levels now that we're asking teachers to attend to that they don't necessarily teach you in school, of like the instructional design and the instruction. So I think that's an important thing to really think about as well.
No, definitely not. Glad that you brought that up and everything, because even on that higher education level and everything, I can tell you that a couple of my friends that are teachers that are now doing this online learning, I remember that when I was in grade school, you would always have those students, and I was not one of them, but did have some friends that would come up with those creative excuses, the dog ate the food or whatever. But now we're seeing that on the college level again, because I can tell you that a lot of my friends that are teachers are telling me that they're getting all kinds of grown adults that are giving them some crazy excuses for the reason that they're not doing their homework. And like I said, it was a basic assignment. It was something that they were given in the early part of the curriculum, and they come back with some, I'll just put it bluntly, a BS excuse and everything. And it's totally that whole, the dog you ate the homework kind of thing. So I think that we also have to have teachers and just society in general teach folks just basic common sense and basic I hate to put it this way, but somebody, I think it was you, Tansy, mentioned the Bible, mentioned some basic morals. So definitely got to have some basic morals no matter what your faith is. But I find that sometimes folks do not do that. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on what I just said, Danita, because I do think that even sometimes within the higher ed, we are finding that some folks are using it as an excuse, for lack of a better term, to stay engaged.
Engagement is key for learning, whether you are brick and mortar or you are in some other hybrid or virtual. It's the relationship and rapport that you build that makes the student open to the learning that you're going to provide. And it doesn't really matter the location of it if that rapport isn't there. And as Amelia said, if you're just focusing on skills, then you're going to lose people, right? Because that's not really that engaging, right? It's low-level thinking, and that's not what we want our students to do. And I agree with Shanae that when we are asking teachers to take their curriculum, and now they're going to, as we have called it at our district, virtualize it. We made up a word. We had other words for it, but they had 4 letters or less, and it wasn't really pleasant. So we're calling it virtualizing the curriculum. There are just some people who don't have the capacity to envision it that way, not because they don't want to, but this is so different from the way they were trained, as Adele had mentioned. But I do find that the staff who have done an online course or degree are approaching their instruction virtually based on their experience, good, bad, or indifferent, very differently than staff members who are just struggling with this. And when I work with a teacher who's struggling, I'll say to them, have you ever taken an online course? And if the person says to me, I've been teaching for 20 years and I haven't taken a course in 20 years, well, then I know exactly where I need to start working with them, which is in a very different place, right? Because it's a different way of not only thinking about your instruction, but it's also a very different way about thinking about how students learn.
Yeah.
And so, and the older the student is, the more difficult it is to kind of help the students flip, right? Because we have kind of institutionalized them to only learn in one way. It was our own fault. And now we're saying flip the switch to both the teacher and student and say, now learn differently. And so we have to really think about the supports that we put out there, the tools for success that Dr. Latimer had talked about, not just for our students, but for our teachers, so that they can reevaluate what's important and how will they know that their students not only have received the information, but can apply that information, whether it's problem solving or something else. So the innovation is being cognizant of all of that that's happening and rethinking, as Adele said, how we prep teachers and administrators to be successful in this very different world that we're living in now.
And one of our listeners actually had a question for you and everything for all of the folks. And I think Tansy also has a point that she wanted to make. But the question is that Carolyn Edwards was asking was, when we finish building on the successful motivations we made during the pandemic or when the darkness of COVID clears, will we simply go back to business as usual because it's familiar to us? Or will there be some kind of like change in the way that we're thinking? And I see all of y'all are shaking your head, and I'm glad to see that. But I would love to hear what Tansy's got to say. And I think Adele's got some comments as well. So I'm getting ready to unmute you there, Tansy. So
we cannot go back to business as usual if we cannot see the benefits of the changes that we've made and the transitions that we've had to make. I just don't know how you can be an educator. I mean, we have been, our teachers are resilient. That's one thing I want to say. And we're very innovative and creative. We have been able to turn things around quickly, and it's for the better. So I can't see us going back to business as usual because there's so much that we've done that I think is so much more beneficial now that we make this transition.
Adele, I think you had something you wanted to add to that.
I just shout out because that's my old colleague, Miss Wood, that's in here, and I appreciate her. Yes, ELA teacher, Columbia, South Carolina.
Shanae's got some people that are watching and giving them a shout out. We appreciate that. But Adele, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I think I'm going to certainly, piggyback on Tansy's comments. Our teachers are resilient. Our kids are resilient. They won't accept going back. The young kids who are starting kindergarten now, they don't know what the inside of a school building looks like. So they have no prior knowledge of the old way we did school. For students who have been at this a while, if the period of time has been long enough, we've undone a lot of those old practices and have replaced them or virtualized them, as Danita says. They won't accept going back, and nor should we. It's too much of an exciting prospect to look forward. So education has changed forever. For those people that are saying it's not, they're kind of deluding themselves. But how quickly or how much more different learning becomes more global, not seat time necessarily, but just like we never envisioned state tests being on a computer, right? People were out of their minds. What do you mean you're going to give a state test on a computer? It's never been done. Now we know what to do with, in many cases, the technologies and the tools to change learning. So we're not going back. We have the opportunity to go forward and make a really big difference for kids going forward.
I think Amelia had a point that she wanted to make, as did Shanae, but I'm going to get to Amelia. So Amelia, what was the point?
I think that we cannot be naive because policies and systems are set up to keep things the same.
Yes.
So
yes.
We have to be really united. Parents, educators, partners. Like I see at American Reading Company, we changed everything in order to now accommodate to this new reality, right? But I'll tell you, if the front line, the districts don't keep fighting, there's nothing that is set up for this innovation to continue.
Right.
The system works really well for some people, And those people are in charge. They don't want this to continue.
I'm concerned too that, so we provide professional development, and in the summer, everybody was like, oh my God, come and teach our teachers. I had designed and my book will be out soon. The manuscript is done. It's called Reinventing the Classroom Experience, Learning Anytime, Anywhere. And so everything we've been doing is about one way to teach, structures and strategies that work as well as home as they do in school. And that's how we're moving. But once the school year started, a lot of administrators are saying to me, oh yeah, I want to do that. And I want to talk to you about that. But right now I'm up to my elbows in COVID cases. So I don't have time for that. And then somebody's like, oh, we just have so many logistical things. It's a nightmare. Like, I just don't have time for that. And I fear that changing instruction, innovating the professional development that goes along with it is the thing that you can, what's the box that I think it was Stephen Covey does, where it's like, what is important, not important, urgent, not urgent. And I feel like the important but not urgent part of professional development and growth of teachers is being pushed aside. And I do believe a lot of people are feeling like we're just getting through this until we get back. And we still have a lot of schools that are live streaming. You just plop a camera in the corner of the room and we're going to live stream those lessons. And that is not changing anything. So I fear that while we have pockets of innovation going on, that there is not a commitment at all levels to say, this is the only point in time that you are being given to make all of those changes that you've been asking for decades. Like, this is it. Don't blow it.
Don't blow it.
But, I think what's also important is now that we've experienced and we've tasted this hybrid learning, this genie's out of the bottle. She's not going back in, right? So there are some students who are flourishing in ways that they never have before. And parents do not want to go back to a place where their child was fearful of coming to school, had anxiety, didn't want to participate, but online they're finding their voice.
Yeah.
So we will never be able to go back completely to what it was on March 13th. And, everybody talks about the good old days. And then when you think about it, they were really not all that good to begin with. Right. So there are some things we don't want to go back to. But I think this genie is out of the bottle, and we will always have this type of blended learning platform in our districts moving forward, which will present challenges. But if we're talking about meeting the needs of students to promote their learning, then we have to be willing to balance the needs for these multiple and learning environments, because we have shown that there are students and teachers who are more successful in this environment. Mm-hmm. And so can we continue the innovation by saying we will always meet the needs of students? And one of the ways we can do it is by establishing multiple ways in which students can learn. And their location of learning doesn't have to be in a brick and mortar building, but it can be in this virtual or hybrid environment. And if that's really what we believe we should be doing as educators, is meeting the needs of our students, then we need to be open to this moving forward.
I agree.
I agree with you on that, and I know we're getting ready to wind down with everything, but I was wondering, as we're getting ready to wind down, if y'all could tell me what your thoughts are, and not that it hasn't happened before, but we're now to have a new administration, and we're about to have an educator definitely in the seat of power, being the first lady. So I was wondering if you could talk about the importance of having an educator there in the White House, because I know Dr. Jill Biden is definitely a peer of Miss Sulla and a number of y'all. She is an educator, so she will be there in the seat of power. So I was wondering if y'all's thoughts on having somebody like that from the education world. And like I said, I know there have been other first ladies, other folks in the political world that have been tied to education, but it's been a while. So like I said, I would love to hear y'all's perceptions of having somebody there while we're going through innovations that is at the seat of power and all the things that are going on.
She's not the first educator in that position, but I think what we have right now is all the stars are aligned. Mm-hmm. Right? And when you look at who they already chose to help them during the transition, Linda Darling-Hammond is at the top. How can you go wrong, right? So just the people that they are choosing tells you a lot about the potential. But I think parents and kids are going to be the ones to hold us accountable.
Yes. Yeah, I would agree with that and everything. Tansy, what are your thoughts as you?
I would agree with Amelia. Our primary stakeholders, our students and our parents, are going to have to hold us accountable, and they will hold us accountable. But I think it's exciting to have a true educator, someone who understands exactly what we're going through and what has to happen in order for us to provide equitable opportunities for our students.
Yeah.
So it's exciting, it's refreshing, because we've struggled a little bit. And that I'm going to say that's politically correct. We've struggled.
It is political.
We've struggled for the past 2 years.
This is an online dinner party where we don't believe in political correctness. So you don't have to be politically correct on my account, because I can tell you that on a number of my shows, I am far from politically correct. So don't feel that you got to be politically correct on my account.
Well, politics aside, though, I do believe that the Secretary of Education should be schooled in the field of education and should have that experience, because we don't, the people who are at the heads of hospitals are doctors. Like, how did we let our profession be run by people who aren't in education? So I think that that they'll probably make the right decision, the right move to get someone who's an educator in that position.
I would definitely agree with you on that. And like I said, we are going to wind down. And by the way, this has been another fantastic dinner party. I usually have my mystery guests and my mystery clues and all of that. But I'm going to do it a little differently and everything. So I do have like some questions that usually would be popping up and everything. So I'm going to bring those around. But the difference this time on the mystery guest is that folks can email me at bluesradio@gmail.com. And whoever emails me first with those right answers, then they will win the contest. So I've got to bring up these clues and everything. So I'm going to bring those up because it is 3 folks. I was thinking about doing 4, but it's actually only going to be 3 this time around, and they do have connections to the world of education, because one of them is a former educator, so definitely things along that nature, and then another one comes out of the world of unions and all of that. So I'm going to give the clues, and while the educators are talking about their final thoughts, folks can be reading these clues. Educators, if y'all feel like looking at the clues, it'll be scrolling across and putting it in chat who you think these 3 folks are. That'll be cool as well. But I would love to hear y'all's thoughts just in terms of final thoughts of positivity around education, around a number of other things, and all of that. So definitely, if you would share some of your positive thoughts, and I'll come to Nancy last, and she's my partner in crime in creating this great panel of educators to come on the show for the second time. We're going to have to do this a 3rd or 4th time. You've already met Kim. You know she's down with it. So we're going to have this as an online dinner party feature until you spin off and do your own thing. And I have no problem with spinoffs. But until that happens, we'll have to set up another one.
I think it was Amelia who actually gave me the name of my show. I think it's going to be Let's Solve It, Education Unwrapped.
I like it. I like it. Great title and everything.
A collaborative group each week or whenever it's going to run to solve a particular issue in education.
Sounds great. I like that. It's a great title and everything. And I'm going to go with Tansy. So if you want to give her the positive thoughts and everything, and I will just read a couple of the clues. In conjunction with Owen, he opened an employment office in Harlem with the goal of providing work training for those migrating from the South, as well as providing information for them on unions. So that is a clue of one of the folks that apparently he was involved in unions. He also developed his own style of civil rights activism. He believed that Black people, as they were called back then, we like to be called African Americans now, should stand together to achieve equality, both legally and economically. So that's some of the clues and everything. And also one of the other ones was he also believed in restricting immigration so that African Americans would not need to compete with other immigrants that would work for very low rates of pay. So I do know that is a conversation that goes on even to this day. And a lot of folks may not may feel one way or the other about separating the races and competing the races against each other. I actually think that we should all be one unified community, even though we want to celebrate our diversity and all of that. And he also totally rejected the racial class system that took hold in the early part of the 20th century. And we've been talking about breaking holes of things, including our educational system. And in 1920, he ran for the New York State Comptroller. And in 1922, for the Secretary of State of New York, he ran on the Socialist Party ticket, but was unsuccessful on both occasions. So that's a little bit of clues on that particular gentleman. And y'all are over there just pondering like good educators and trying to figure out who that might be. But Tansy, I'm going to let you go and let you give your thoughts and everything, do the whole Google thing and all of that. But Tansy, so any words of positivity that you would like to share with our international audience, and then I'll come to you, Amelia.
Go Tansy. Go Tansy.
Oh, hold on a second. I
got it. I would just like to say thank you for the opportunity to be here this evening with this distinguished panel of guests, and I'm just elated and honored to be here. I would just like to say that I am proud to be an educator during these times. I believe that my motto this year has been agility, flexibility, and adaptability. And our teachers have risen to the occasion and they have exceeded my expectations. And so I'm very proud to say that I'm in the education field now. And I'm proud of all the educators across the globe who have really and truly met the needs of our students and have put service before self. So that's what I would leave you all with this evening. Thank you for the opportunity. I've enjoyed you all.
Appreciate it. Amelia, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. So it's on you.
So I'll do a little bit of pressure with support. This is a critical moment for us to get it right. This will not happen again, right? So as you move forward, don't do it alone. Look at this. Look at the screen right now, right? We are not alone. So surround yourself by the geniuses because they will make you better. This is hard, but we cannot pass this opportunity. And then I'll leave you with a book. This book is absolutely a must. It's called Cultivating Genius by Gholdy Muhammad. And it's very much like Nancy's book. It's not the what, but the how. It gets into how do you make this happen in a way that put blackness, excellence, joy in the forefront. So this is a must.
Cool. Danita, it's on you. So it's on you, your thoughts and everything.
Yep. So, I have a mantra that we've been using this year. And my mantra this year has been two things. We've been focusing on learning, not earning, right? It's not about the grade. We're focusing on learning because in the virtual world, everybody's worried about can we get the grade in the grade book, but we're going to be about learning, not earning. And we're also working with progress and not perfection. Yeah. This is new. We have to just make progress every day. Can we move one student a little bit further today? Can we get an extra student to log in today? Can we help a teacher try a new strategy today? So we're trying to focus on progress and not perfection. And I think, as terrible as this may sound, this has been rejuvenating for me. I've been in education for 30 plus years. I feel like a first year teacher and a first year administrator with all of the angst, and fear, but also excitement at trying to do something right on behalf of students and now on behalf of teachers. So I'm finding this an exciting time, and I see this as the glass is half full, not half empty. And I'm excited by the people like the panel here who keep me inspired to make progress every day.
And I want to get to Adele, but before I get to Adele, I do have two other folks that I've got to put clues out so that folks can hopefully email me with the right answers. But the second one was she was educated at Perkins School for the Blind. She became the teacher of Helen Keller after she graduated from that particular school. She is also named, so this is not her current name, but she was named Joanna Mansfield Sullivan in her baptismal certificate. So that was the name that you would find if you were to look on history and find her baptismal certificate and all of that, and during the Great Potato Famine, which of course we know that was way back whenever, that during the Great Potato Famine, her parents moved to the United States in 1860 as immigrants. They were from County Limerick, Ireland. So that is some of the things that she was involved in. It is a young lady and everything. And of course, like I said, she was in the teaching field, because I couldn't feel that I could do a whole panel with teachers for a little bit over 3 hours and not have at least a couple of folks affiliated with teaching as my mystery guest. And she did have some great quotes, by the way, this particular person and everything. And some of them dealt with teaching, including some things that we're talking about right now. So one of the quotes that this particular person brought up and everything was, keep on beginning and failing. Each time you fail, start all over again, and you will grow stronger until you have accomplished a purpose. Not the one that you began with, perhaps, but the one that you'll be glad to remember. She also said, which I'm sure a number of you teachers will agree with, that children require guidance. She said that they require guidance and that they sympathy far more than instruction. So one of her arguments was that children require guidance and sympathy far more than instruction. So like I said, she was involved in the education field and all of that. And one of the last quotes that I will bring out there, well, actually, I'm a big fan of Renaissance, so I'm going to bring up two quotes. But one of them, my heart is singing for joy this morning. A miracle has happened. The light of understanding has shone upon my little people's minds. And behold, all things are changed. So she definitely was an educator with quotes like that. And like I said, whether it's a cultural Renaissance, which I am a big fan of, or a number of other Renaissance, she had a quote about Renaissance, which is, every Renaissance comes to the world with a cry, the cry of the human spirit to be free. And I would argue that we are in the middle of an educational renaissance right now. So I would argue that we are in the middle of one of those going on. So that's two of the three. And like I said, I do want folks to email me at bluesradio@gmail with hopefully the right answers and all of that. And I will bring up the clues for the third person in a minute. But first, we've got to get to Adele with your thoughts and everything.
Just in closing, this has been a great 3 hours with all of the varied participants. It's been great to be on with you ladies for this hour. I often say that there isn't a problem that educators can't solve. We always find a solution. I think in this case, we are finding our way through a problem to some new solutions. Yeah. And again, I agree with Amelia. We do that by not doing it alone. Right? There are always the people who are ahead of the curve, but you find your like partners. And that's how, again, I came to be one of those formers, because we needed some collaboration and finding some other people to work with. So, I think the solution that we come to will certainly maximize the potential of all of our students and all of our teachers and all of our administrators. And we'll find ourselves in a better place. I have to be optimistic. I have to be positive. I too agree. It's a new day, and I'm seizing this as an opportunity. And for those naysayers, you know what? They're going to be left behind. Right? They'll either retire, they'll find a different way, or, everyone else is going to move ahead and they'll have to catch up at some point. I just choose to be positive about this.
No, I agree. And I agree that positivity is a wonderful thing. Before we get to Shanae, who I think is actually cheating and looking on Google, because I'm seeing that her looking down and everything. So I'm just teasing her and all of that. But the final clue is that her seventh and final novel in her popular series was released in 2007. So she was definitely an author and all of that. So she was also involved in the field of education. And folks don't know that. She actually taught someplace and everything. Her series sparked great enthusiasm among children and was credited with generating a new interest in reading. And film versions of her book were released in 2001, 2011, and became some of the top grossing movies in the world. So, and she also made a foray into what some folks would consider adult fiction with Casual Vacancy, which was released in 2012. So definitely, as folks know, she was also involved in education and all of that. And she also penned a crime novel, and that was called The Cuckoo's Calling, and that was using a pseudonym. So she was using a pseudonym at that particular time. So all of that is some of the clues of our three mystery guests. And if they want to reach me at bluesradio@gmail.com and tell me who those folks are, of course, I might let the teachers, since they seem to know, give a clue. Since they got to give me all three, they seem to know who one of them is. At the end of everybody's thing, including Nancy's, I will find out if they know who any of those answers are. And that can be us letting the teachers have a little bit of minute of cheating with the students and everything. But Shanae, let it go ahead and hear your final thoughts.
Thank you. I always learn a lot in having these conversations. And so I'm very thankful for the different mentorships that I'm able to cultivate as I, learn and talk to more educators in the field, for sure, because there is power in collaboration and bringing together minds and really using that to continue to move us forward. I think that, yes, this is a great pivotal time in education. I also think that it has shown a huge light on the inequities that are present. And so though we have transitioned a lot, there's still a lot of work to be done to make sure that the chasm or the gap doesn't become a chasm. You know what I mean? And so like as we continue to innovate and create and design to make sure we're always having all of our learners in mind. And I think that this shift has forced us to do that where we may not have done that, right? In a brick and mortar, because we could just keep doing the same things. But I think in this thought of now we have to really be intentional about what we're doing. We're really able to see each learner and making sure that gaps are intentionally addressed, because I think that's going to be the thing that really shines a light on this time is, did we make sure that all of our kids were still met with that same expectation, rigor, and learning from before, because we changed how we thought about things and we were really able to reach them. And so I think that's really what's important, that we're continue to progress. And I love Danita's mantra, like it is progress, not perfect, because ain't no one been here before. No one has done this. Okay. No one has done this. No one knows what to do next. No one's been in this time. And so if we just keep moving forward, we're not trying to make it perfect, but if we know what we're trying to aim for, I think that is always going to be good enough each day.
And Nancy, I want to hear your final comments as well. But if any of you teachers want to give one of the three away, I don't mind, because they got to give all two of them. They got to give me all three. So since some of y'all knew the answer to one of them and seem to know it, if you want to reveal who that one person is and share that with our audience, that's cool. I have no problem with that, because they still got to give me the other two. So definitely, if you have an idea who that last person was and you want to share it with the audience, y'all can blurt it out right now.
J.K. Rowling, right?
That is correct. That is correct. That is one of the three. Yeah. So they need to figure out who the other two folks are and everything. But yes, that is correct. J.K. Rowling is one of them. But there are two more that they need to figure out as well. So Nancy, it's on you.
Who's the weakest link? When I was 5 years old, which was in 1960, so I'm 65. So it's when I was 5 years old, I went to school in Michigan, where kindergarten was compulsory. And I was school phobic. I wouldn't go to school. And I was afraid of school. I was afraid of my teacher. I didn't trust her. She tried to trick me into liking school, and it was really not a good situation. So I refused to go to school. And I have this image in my head, like it was yesterday, of being in my mom's 57 Dodge, where I'm holding on, back in the day when you used to roll down windows, right? I'm holding on to that. She's got my little patent leather shoes out the other side of the car, literally pulling me. And I am holding on to that car. Finally, my father said, if you're not going to go to school, you're going to sit on this couch. And I sat on that couch. I swear it was weeks. It was probably hours, but I would not go to school. So I always tell this when I do keynotes. I use this as an intro, and I say, my father did what any self-respecting father would do, because they called him in and they said, she's going to have to repeat kindergarten. And my father was like, well, she's kind of bright. Like, I really don't think she should repeat kindergarten. And they're like, well, she didn't attend enough days of school. So my dad did what any self-respecting father would do. We moved. And we moved to Massachusetts, where kindergarten wasn't compulsory. And I successfully completed a month of kindergarten. I always upset the kindergarten teachers when I say, so I'm living proof you don't need kindergarten to succeed. But when I got to Massachusetts, that teacher got me to love school and to want to come to school. And I remember I always wanted my mommy in school. And I just said to my mom, you can go home, I'm fine. And I remember thinking at 5 years old, this teacher sees me. and is addressing my needs. And at that time I said, I want to be a teacher because I want to make a difference in the lives of other kids the way she did in mine. So what I would say when we think about instructional equity at this time is just make sure you truly see all of your kids, every one of your kids. Take the time to, when we talk about synchronous instruction, I'm not a fan of synchronous instruction, live streaming your lessons. I'm a fan of individual conversations with students and small groups of students and getting to know them. I think when it comes to Shanae and I talk a lot, I am extremely blessed to have Shanae as our director of educational equity. And we talk a lot about our 7 lenses of equity and the idea that opportunity isn't enough. You also need access. If a teacher is live streaming a lesson at 10, that's opportunity to learn. But if that student is home taking care of younger siblings, if they're sharing a device and that student can't get on at that time, that student has no access. So I keep saying to teachers, videos. I did a video called the 5-5-5-4 approach is what we teach teachers. It's 5 different types of learning activities, 5 different types of synchronous engagement, 5 different types of videos. And then shout out to Shanae, who added, you also need 4 pair of earrings because you got to have a little dangle. As Shanae said early on in this virtual world, nobody cares about my shoes anymore. Nobody looks at me and says like, oh my God, I love your shoes. And it's like earrings are the new shoes. And for the gentlemen, ties are the new shoes. So make sure that all of your students have access to learning. And I don't mean the technology. I mean that the learning activities are at their level, that they are culturally appropriate for students, that students see themselves in the instructional materials, that we are providing a lot more videos. We started with saying kindergarten teachers need to do their morning message as a video. And we test piloted it on our own kindergarten kids at home. And it was hysterical because the kids are like watching the video of the teacher. They're watching it a couple of times. We had one of them where the teacher is then saying to the students, so what is the weather like out? What does it look like? And she had them go to the window and come back. And the one kid says, it's sunny. And she goes, I can't hear you. And the kid yells, it's sunny. And then he looks at his mother and goes, I know it's a video. But it was like, they were so engaged. And video is equity because I can watch it when I need to, and I can watch it as many times as I need to. So see each one of your students and make sure that you are giving them equitable access to those opportunities to learn. That's my soapbox.
It was a great soapbox, a great show. I was glad to have y'all on here once again as we did our online dinner party with the educators for the second time. Looking forward to the next time. And like I said, hopefully we'll be having conversations with Kim and we'll have the breakout show eventually. But before that, we might do another one of these here on the online dinner party and all of that. So definitely anytime that I can engage with teachers and have conversations with teachers, because like I said, that's a vital part of my life. And definitely I have friends that are in the teaching field, whether they're college educators or whether they're grade school teachers. And I've got folks that are doing teaching on that, what I call grassroots level. They're community people that are teaching folks in their community, because I do think that mentors are also very important. And I think it was you, Amelia, that mentioned mentors. And I do think that mentorship is something that is vital in our community, and you can mentor in a lot of ways in our community. And I think that we need to encourage folks to be mentors and do that on a regular basis, whether that's with you teachers in the classroom or even having folks come to their environments in a virtual world, since we're in the virtual world that we're in right now. But I do urge many of our folks to be involved in mentorship, because I feel that too often we're seeing some folks that are getting lost in the cracks because they're not having connection either with the teachers or with the mentors. And I think that that's something that we can work on, is trying to find ways to get folks engaged in mentorship and have them engaged in the education system. So that's my little bit of a soapbox as well, the importance of mentorship. So I'm going to wrap up the show, but it was great having all of y'all here, the 6 of y'all that are here with me right now, as well as the other guests. So I want to thank all of y'all for being on, and who knows, Kim might even be around, and after I end the broadcast, she might pop in and have a conversation with Nancy, because I know she's been listening and everything. So we'll find out if that happens or doesn't happen. But I do want to end the show. We're looking forward to another online dinner party. And by the way, educators, I got to let y'all know we're going to have one around politics and the youth. So I'm actually talking to a young lady that's running a program with veterans, and she's got some youth that are learning how to be cowboys and cowgirls. I think it's all girl programs. So I think they're all girls, if I remember correctly, but they're in the West Coast. I believe they're either in Colorado or somewhere around that area. And then we're going to have some activists from the youth community, the under 30 community. So we're going to have a whole discussion around the views of what's going on in the world, whether it's the pandemic, whether it's Black Lives Matter, or a number of other things. So if y'all have students that y'all are engaged with, that'll be 2 weeks from today on the 16th. It'll be like this. It'll be a roundtable kind of discussion. So if there are any students that you got that might be great to have in that conversation, I would love them to come on that panel or that's going to take place, because I do find, and a good friend of mine, Zach, has said the same things, that too often we hear from the adults. We don't necessarily hear what the kids are thinking and all of that. So I would love to hear what the kids are actually thinking, so we can hear it from their mouths. We don't need to hear the leadership that's talking to them, but I'd like to hear what they're thinking right now from their own mouths. So that's what we're going to do on the 16th. So my invitation to all of the people that have been on the panel, both the 6 of y'all here, as well as the others that were on earlier, is if you know any educators, any students that are in, and well as young folks that are under 30 that would be interested in this kind of panel, I would love to have them on 2 weeks from today on the 16th. So we're going to have that taking place. And the last one that I want to shout out, which has nothing to do with the online dinner party, but on Monday afternoon on my Mullins Music and Memory Show, a good friend of mine, Ronnie Warner, who did that film This Christmas, we actually caught up a couple of days ago. He will be my guest of honor on that show. So folks can learn all about what the Hollywood industry has been like, because he's been involved with everybody from Tiffany Haddish to, he did that movie This Christmas with Chris Rock and Loretta Devine. So he's definitely been plugged into the Hollywood industry and lives out in Los Angeles, around the Hollywood area. So we're going to have a very deep conversation around what Hollywood looks like from his perspective. And he is an African-American director. So I'm looking forward to that. We are longtime friends. So it's been great catching up with him by phone, but to have him on this platform is going to be truly amazing as well.
And Mark, we spent so much time talking about education. We failed to talk about Tansy, who traveled with Paul McCartney and Wings.
That's right. We did not get to that. That's right. You did not. You traveled with Paul McCartney and Wings. How did you manage to do that? And I'm still trying to figure that out. So if you're going to give our folks a brief introduction, because, they give me a little bit of leeway. So we did have Penelope talk about her connections to ballet, but we did not get to you and Paul McCartney. So I'm going to run over a little bit. Tell me, how the heck did you get with Paul McCartney and Wings?
Well, my parents, both of them are musicians. In fact, my entire family are musicians. I'm the only educator. So, but anyway, my father is from Louisiana, but he came to Macon because of Otis Redding. They were friends. And he met Paul in Nashville and started working with him in 1974 and toured with him until 1980 with the Wings. And he was the horn section leader. And so Paul was very family oriented. And so he always would pack us all up in this bus and we would tour. And like when we were in England, we would go from one country to the other and go on tour with our parents. So
awesome.
Remember it very vividly. Yeah, very vividly. Like it was yesterday.
Oh,
Yes.
you say that was back in 1974, but you were talking about it like it was 2010. I was like, that seemed like that was just yesterday. So you were saying that was
a while back. It was a while back. It was 1974 to 1980. So, yeah.
Wow.
Very interesting times. Very, very interesting. But like I said, he was very family oriented. Linda was alive then, and so just wonderful people.
Yeah.
Sounds great. Were there any other things with our other 5 folks that we got, or 6 folks counting you, Nancy, that we need to get plugged in before I hit the end broadcast button? And so, Danita, are there any dark secrets that I need to know about you, or Amelia, or Renee, or either Adele? Well, Adele, we know you're into acting, but are there any things that I did not learn about you that I need to find out now? Like, who knows? Maybe you perform with Prince for all I know.
Not that I
Only thing I can say was that in my past career, before I became an administrator, I was a music teacher for 14 years before I took my first administrative position.
And so I'll share that my claim to fame was that I was Paulo Freire's student in Brazil. So,
wow.
Awesome.
Shanae, we got any things that we don't know about you that we can have revealed that we don't know? You got anybody that's you shooter?
I mean, I too am the black sheep of my family, Tansy, because they're all feds. But not
they all work at an undisclosed location, an undisclosed job.
They're not going to say what the job is. That's undisclosed.
Mark, you have lost control.
Well, you're going to wrap everything up. Adele, any great folks that you've acted with and everything, you've done all that work with the New Jersey Playhouse.
I don't have any. I can't think of any of those kinds of things. Nope. Sorry. I'll leave it at that.
The fact that you're an educator, that's important as well. Nancy, I'm leaving it at you. The last one before I hit that end broadcast. I'm sure there's a secret life that you have that you're not telling everybody, but you can share with the world right now. So
Nancy's got
you're secretly with the mafia, and they don't know that.
Well,
an art gallery.
I did own an art gallery. Well, back in the day when I was a kid, when I was like, I think I was a teenager. And interestingly enough, I didn't like the music of the Jefferson Airplane. I didn't appreciate it then, although I love it now. And Grace Slick was the singer of the Jefferson Airplane. And then they became the Jefferson Starship. They toned it down a little bit, whatever. Anyway, when they were the Jefferson Airplane, my father came home one day and he said, I met the manager for the Jefferson Airplane. And I told him my daughter writes her own music. And he said, well, why don't you have her write a song for the Jefferson Airplane and I'll see if I can get them to play it. And I said to him, yeah, nah, it's not my kind of music. And the funny thing was the kind of music I was writing was the kind of music that they reinvented themselves in when they became the Jefferson Starship. And I was like, damn it, I could have written their music. So later on, I was also in college. I was a professional singer and I was offered 2 prospects of recording contracts to move out to California. And I said, no, I want to be a teacher. So I always say I have the only mother who wanted me to quit teaching. And, my mother wanted me to quit college and go to California. So I said, I have the only mother who used to say, but my daughter could have been a rock star. And years later, when I had my art gallery, I was walking through a gallery and I saw a picture of the very young Grace Slick in one of her albums. And I'm like, I wonder why they have a picture of Grace Slick there. And I look inside and Grace Slick was inside the gallery. So I went in, introduced myself, met her, told her my funny story that I never wrote a song for her and bought her art. So those are my musical
that's a great story. Like I said, I don't have anything like that. I did think about being a meteorologist before getting involved in activism and radio and a number of other things that I'm involved in. But as a kid, I did think that I wanted to be a meteorologist. And the thing that I thought was that you were going to have to be involved. This is one of those cases where education didn't quite work because I was thinking that I was going to have to take science courses, including like dissecting a frog and other things. I wasn't thinking of the difference between earth science and animal science and the fact that I might be able to avoid that. So that's why I didn't become a meteorologist. Because the first time that I went to dissect something and I saw the blood, I was like, nope, that's science. That's what that's about. I'm not going to be a meteorologist. So that was my claim to fame that I avoided. I could have been your local weatherman or something like that, telling y'all where the hurricane was coming and all of that. But because of my aversion to science, I stayed away from it. And the last thing I'm going to say, it's actually not about me, but it's about one of our producers on the International Broadcast Media Network. But Jeff Eachin does a show where he's talking about, it's called Weed Wednesday, and yes, it is about that substances you teachers don't want in your classroom. But part of what he does is he talks about trying to get folks out of prison for doing nonviolent offenses and things of that nature. So that's really what the focus of the show is about, not so much what that drug is about and things of that nature. But his sister, who we're hoping that he'll come on one of our shows, maybe his show or something like that, she is a world famous. He's actually a famous producer and done stuff in the music industry. He even did some stuff with like some of the early rappers and all of that. But there used to be this very popular TV show called Cheers. His sister was the creator of that.
Oh, wow.
Jeff Eachin's sister was one of our producers. His sister was the creator of that particular show.
Well done.
Wow.
And on that note, I'm going to wrap everything up. It was truly amazing having all of y'all.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Great conversation. And like I said, just talking about education, like Nancy said, we could do this for 5, 6, 7 hours, as many hours as folks would let me do it, because it is a conversation that needs to happen on a regular basis. Hopefully we'll be having it happen on a regular basis on this platform when Nancy's shows gets launched and some of the other shows that we're looking at having on a regular basis. So hopefully that will be in the near future. But in the meantime, we'll have these kind of forums until that details are all worked out and all of that. So that should be coming our way in the not too distant future. So we're looking forward to having that happen and having folks be engaged in that conversation. And as you know, there are certain things that we have regularly on this show to end everything. One of them is my producer's daughter, who does like a whole thing around COVID and all of that. So I'm going to try to bring that video up so that we can see that video playing, as well as the airplane that ends the show. But, you know, there are a number of things that go on. And of course, we are in the middle of this pandemic, as many of the teachers we're talking about. So I'm going to bring up Ankit's daughter, and she's going to give us some tips on.
और ऐसे अपने खांसी जब आएगी तो ऐसे करेंगे अच्छू अच्छू और कोरोना वायरस को धन्यवाद हमारा म्यूजिक सुनने का।
She's so amazing. We love her when she comes in and everything. And on that note, we're going to wrap it all up. And I hope that y'all had a thorough good time. And I look forward to seeing and talking to all of my new friends. As Shanae knows, if you haven't been contacted by me on LinkedIn, you will be, because I'm oftentimes reaching out and making new friends and all of that. So I'll be reaching out to Amelia and Danita and joining and having conversations with them even offline so that we can build this new friendship that we have created. Don't worry, Tansy, you as well. And of course, I think I've already reached out to Adele, but if I haven't, I will be very shortly. And I know I reached out to you, Nancy, even though we've done this twice. I reached out to you yesterday. So look at your page and hopefully you've already clicked yes, and we've gone from second degree to first degree.
All right. All right.
Thank you, Marc.
Thanks, guys. I love you all. Love
Thank
all.
you, Nancy.
Thank you. Good night.